today. It's always exciting to see many different folks from many different places join us. This is, of course, part of Filecoin Orbit, which is a week-long community-led celebration of everything Filecoin to celebrate the one-year anniversary since mainnet. And oh, how time has flown, many, many highlights. And one of the kind of biggest highlights of late is Green Filecoin. So we're really excited with our amazing lineup today to dive in there. So yeah, we'll just give it a couple more. Let's give it another 30 seconds just to let people funnel in, grab their coffee, get settled into a chair, and then we'll kick off. Okay, so as I said, a very warm welcome to the Filecoin, the Green Filecoin Meetup. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we're going to be looking at the tools that are being built to help Filecoin storage providers and clients prove their renewable energy use. We'll also explore how we can better understand the environmental impact of Filecoin as a whole and work to reduce it. And we'll take a look at how the community is engaging with the green crypto movement more broadly and what standards are in the works to transition towards a verifiably carbon neutral or carbon negative network. Together, we'll chart a path for environmental sustainability in Filecoin. Please remember that all Filecoin Orbit events abide by the Filecoin Community Code of Conduct. Be kind, be awesome to each other. If you'd like to ask questions of our amazing speakers, then please pop them in the chat and they'll answer them whenever they get a chance to. Our first speaker today is no stranger to you all. It's Juan Benet, creator of Filecoin and CEO of Protocol Labs. He'll be talking about the pathway to Filecoin as a verifiably environmentally positive network. A very warm welcome, Juan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for that. One second, let me share my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Great. Well, it's super exciting to be here speaking to everybody. This is a topic that so many of us are incredibly passionate about as we look ahead in this moment in history and we think about the great challenges over time. And it's always important to kind of think about how we can make do our part, improve things, and try to make sure that our projects are doing what we can to improve things for the world. So I'm really excited to be kicking off this conference today. There's a ton of really amazing activity, and I'm super proud to say that the Filecoin network is leading the charge in the green blockchain world, and you'll hear about lots of really amazing things today that both show some of that progress so far and hint at what we can do. We can do as a network. So one of the big things, I think everybody coming to this will probably agree on this, and this doesn't need a lot of discussion. There's already plenty of discussion, but just to set baseline, a lot of us here are taking a lot of actions because we think that climate change is an existential risk. It's an existential risk for humans, and it's an existential risk for large species, an existential risk for all our societies and economies and so on. And I think that there's this phenomenal visualization and graph from XACD that really puts the matters into perspective. It has like this amazing sense of just the warming of the planet over time and just the change that's happening now. So what I want to spend the time discussing is both what Web3 enables and the advantages of Web3 when it comes to trying to create green economies or green subsets of an economy, and then why Filecoin is especially positioned to make a significant impact here. I want to give the project a sense of mission towards this. So one of the key things about Web3 is that it makes claims verifiable. So a lot of Web3 is about creating mechanisms and creating structures by which people can introduce some information into the network and create a verifiable trace of activity and verifiable trace of transactions to over time create like a trustless structure by which people can agree on sequences of events and so on. This is the baseline innovation that blockchains ride on, that enable just simple payment transactions, enable currencies, enable smart contracts, and so on. And this is precisely what can make all of the different kinds of verifiable claims and assets and so on associated with green economies much better and much more verifiable. So there's all kinds of problems around green assets in terms of making them verifiable, tracing the provenance over time, tracing the quality, and so on, that Web3 could actually significantly improve. So Web3 can come in to actually help improve how a lot of these economies function. There's a ton of tooling being built around NFTs and around structures representing property and representing non-fungible assets, and that's all of that tooling can be reused and repurposed for things like REX and carbon credits and other kinds of offsetting assets. We can also build structures to measure and create accountability for externalities in systems. So meaning we can use estimates and measures from within a system to understand and gauge what the effects of a system might be, and then account for those within the system. So an example of this might be within a particular blockchain. We'll talk about this in terms of Filecoin, estimating the energy use or estimating the energy expenditure of all participants in that network, and then be able to kind of weave that estimate into mechanisms within the chain, within that system, to account for those kinds of systems. So one of the big problems in energy expenditures in general, and in the problem with climate change and so on, is that it's extremely difficult for many kinds of systems to measure those externalities or to make them, or even if they are measured, it's difficult to enforce accountability with large corporations and governments and so on to actually behave in a certain way. But when you have mechanism design at your disposal, and you can build things into systems, that can totally change, and you can build large scale systems that coordinate and incentivize systems to actually improve how things happen. So this is one of the things that I think is incredibly exciting about Web3 enabling green economies, and it's an extremely promising situation. It gives all Web3 platforms and Web3 blockchain systems a massive advantage in being able to outperform the rest of the world and the rest of the cloud platforms and so on, in creating green economies and in creating not just getting to zero emissions, but actually getting to net negative emissions and to start sequestering carbon and so on. So I think that Filecoin could really enable green economies. I think we could get to be the first self-organized green computing platform, and this involves storage, but also computation and whatnot. And I think that Filecoin could become the greenest blockchain protocol and cryptocurrency. I think we have a lot of work to do to get there. And I think it would be phenomenal if we do that. And I'll spend the rest of the conversation here talking about and exploring how we might be able to do that. At the end of the day, I think all of us participating in the Filecoin network want our work and our network and so on to cause great beneficial environmental externalities. So instead of having systems or participating in economies that have negative environmental externalities, I think that everybody would be much better off if we can create beneficial environmental externalities. So for those unfamiliar, Filecoin is a decentralized storage network designed to store humanity's most important information, and we want to Filecoin uses a set of mechanisms to organize the work of participants around the world to provide us to create a storage network and retrieval network for data. So one of the key components of the Filecoin network is this notion of storage providers. These are participants coming together from around the world, pulling in hardware, operating the network, and storing participants' data and serving it over time. And you can think of the broader Filecoin economy as an island economy where many participants with different roles come together, take on different roles. There are researchers that are figuring out components in protocols. There are developers that are turning that research into software and into tools that people can use. There are storage providers that are using that software to organize hardware that they might import from the outside of the economy and turn it into the useful cloud storage service. And then there are then that cloud storage service can be packaged and given and sold to clients coming from outside of the economy. So over time, the goal of the Filecoin network is to create this this economy that can turn sort of like the raw material, so to speak, of disks and electricity and other types of hardware, and turn it into a much more useful process of providing valuable cloud storage to the rest of the world, and then bring in potential clients and other participants to engage in these networks. And of course, there are many other, this is a simplified view. There are many other participants like application developers and other networks and other platforms and so on that couple here, but this is kind of a simplified view of how different economic participants can operate. Now, when you think about this image and you think about green Filecoin, just think about all the different processes that are happening around this economy and how each of those could become more green. So one example is as we all start getting together in physical spaces and in different conferences and whatnot, being able to offset all of our activity and not just getting to zero again, but like getting to be kind of net negative would be one way that the Filecoin economy could account for its use of resources and make it green. The big one that we're going to be talking about today is related to storage providers and using the hardware and running it with electricity to maintain the network. That's the sort of the biggest expenditure of the Filecoin network, and we've done a ton of work as a project to kind of improve things in that realm. But over time, this sort of extends this intent to greenify Filecoin extends to all corners of the economy, and over time, we want to create a really useful process. So one of the pieces of good news here is that Filecoin is already one of the greenest blockchains around, and so it is very possible for us to lead the charge here. Our proof of useful work consensus is based on valuable, not wasteful work. So already a lot of the work that goes into the process of building blocks and maintaining the blockchain and so on is useful and it's creating some valuable externalities that we then use to weave into the useful cloud storage. So this is not wasteful work like many other proof of work blockchains. It's also the case that proof of storage blockchains tend to be much more energy efficient than proof of work blockchains, just arranging bits in matter and keeping them that way and using that as a consensus building process is a more energy efficient way of doing things than just constantly spending energy in a proof of work process. And the most energy intensive processes within Filecoin, the biggest one, which is sealing, is around on par with normal data center workloads, and so that's really good news for Filecoin in being able to kind of sort of match the rest of the world and how the rest of the world operates in terms of its activity. And electricity is a lower fraction of the cost structure for storage providers than in other blockchains. So electricity is a much lower fraction of the storage provider's cost than say in a proof of work blockchain like Bitcoin or something like that. So in addition to that, Filecoin makes it easy to offset with REX and other kinds of offsets because service providers and storage providers have an identity which can be linked to assets or results, and all different actors in the system have identities where you can sort of estimate their activity and segment what they're doing, and then enable individuals to be able to sort of improve their conditions and purchase offsets and so on, linked to their identity. So the work outputs over time can also be linked to these kinds of offsets. So think of individual sectors or sealing and so on, which can be linked to service providers and to clients. You can use that to model the energy use of all of the activity, and you can estimate how the impact and the footprint of that activity, and then offset it. So the good news is that using the blockchain, using the identities linked in the chain, SPs, clients, and other participants can be linked to REX TCs and others. So this enables us to do some kind of green accounting across the entire protocol. One other really great component here is that Filecoin and IPFS enable storing all of the artifacts related to green offsets. So things like the actual certificates, the information about what different participants are doing, all of that. You can think of needing a global database and a global storage network to be able to store all of this information and make it verifiable and permissionless and all of that. And that is precisely what Filecoin and IPFS are for. So already the network is perfectly tuned for solving the problems that green economies tend to have around being able to kind of have assets that are verifiable, that anybody can access, and so on. And one big change that a lot of the people in the community are talking about is the addition of the FEM, which is kind of the computable layer to Filecoin, and adding the ability to have smart contracts and whatnot. That'll come in to help a lot with this kind of structure, so that enables the actual issuing of NFTs and so on that can represent REX and so on. And the FEM is going to have EVM compatibility, so that's going to enable all of the work that people have been doing with EVM-based contracts and whatnot, for green economies to just smoothly plug into Filecoin, and then Filecoin be able to interact with Ethereum and with all of the other chains in this green economy. There's a great talk about FEM coming later in the week, so if you're interested in that, definitely go check it out. So, putting all these things together, I really think that Filecoin could be, the first self-organized green computing platform. We can create the greenest blockchain protocol and cryptocurrency, and we can be a producer of beneficial environmental externalities. So why might want to do this? Why is this a priority? If you aren't convinced by the existential risk nature, which I think it oftentimes is, reason enough, I can also make the case that this is a phenomenal business advantage for the Filecoin network and for Filecoin network participants. If we lean into this and turn this into a great advantage for Filecoin, we can beat many other cryptocurrencies and blockchains that are stuck in a different view, and we can beat Web2 cloud storage providers and so on. So, as you probably know, you've probably heard of the massive energy expenditure that Bitcoin and other proof of work currencies and blockchains are causing, and you've probably heard of Bitcoin over time being restricted or banned or discouraged in different countries around the world because of the level of electricity use, because of the unpredictability, because of the use of sort of dirty energy instead of green energy, and of the perceived bad environmental impact of all of these facilities. There's of course also the drawing to the hardware itself, but just looking at the electricity itself is a major cause for why policymakers around the world are really concerned about Bitcoin specifically, but other currencies like that. So clean industry, so turning Filecoin and other blockchains into clean industry that is not just goes to net zero, but actually becomes net negative, where having Filecoin operate in your nation, having Filecoin source providers operating in your network is a net benefit, a positive externality for your environment, could completely turn the tide here, and we might see different governments and policymakers worldwide drawing Filecoin and asking for service providers and creating incentives for storage providers to come into their nations, into their communities, and so on, to have the green and clean and net carbon negative externalities of the Filecoin network. So I think we can turn this into a massive business advantage for Filecoin, where policymakers will then prefer Filecoin to thrive in their economies than not having it, or will prefer it to other potential blockchains or other currencies. So we can get to a point where policymakers can invite Filecoin while rejecting other blockchains, or where they're inviting Filecoin and rejecting other cloud storage companies. So think of Web2 facilities and Web2 systems that may not be nearly as successful in greenifying and causing net negative emissions. So it makes perfect business sense for Filecoin to become, the greenest blockchain in the world and the greenest storage platform in the world. So countries in general tend to seek green industry. So this would be great for Filecoin. Again, it is already easy for Filecoin to track and use REX and to estimate its energy use, and over time estimate all of the hardware externalities and so on, and account those and use mechanisms within the protocol to offset those. Filecoin has a great subsidy that can help us do all of this, that can help orient us in that direction. Filecoin can be better than other Web3 blockchain platforms on this, and it can be better than Web2 cloud platforms. So many cloud storage platforms and so on find it difficult to do these kinds of estimations, or don't do them in general. And if you put them in directly into the mechanisms, and you do it worldwide once directly in the protocol, that becomes a dramatically more powerful mechanism than what many centralized cloud storage providers could do. I think in general, Filecoin participants will kind of be really excited, and the morale will be higher as they improve the world. So I think this can be a fantastic positive benefit for everybody participating in Filecoin, to say, hey, like you want to have a, are you worried about climate change, or do you want to make an impact? Come into this network and help greenify all industry and all cloud platforms. So how do we make Filecoin green? You'll hear all about this in the upcoming talks. I'm going to give a super quick summary here. We need to set measurable goals for the whole project. So achievable, ambitious, but first and foremost, very measurable goals for the whole project. And then we need to make tools to measure that energy use and carbon footprint, estimate what we're using as a whole network, estimate what SPs, clients, and other participants are doing. And then over time, kind of measure purchases of RECs and other kinds of offsets, pour all of that data into things like reputation tools and whatnot, and then weave those into actual mechanisms and protocols. So think of this as a great iterative process where we're going to make our way into this, but that'll give us the facilities to make Filecoin green, where we can get to over time also preferring green services and green hardware providers. So Filecoin could create a selective pressure for industry itself and the manufacturers of disks and GPUs and other kinds of hardware to become much greener. And then over time we can sort of offset a lot of our uses with different kinds of offsetting instruments. So one of the things that I want the whole network to do is to not settle for zero. So the whole world right now is having trouble even convincing people to get to zero, but zero is no longer enough. We need to dramatically start getting into net negative emissions. Most of the industry shoots for just neutrality and zero emissions. We must accelerate the correction, and that means that we need to shoot for being net carbon negative. And because Filecoin in general aims to be a broadly beneficial technology for the planet and for all of us and for humans around the world, improving our environment and improving our conditions is totally on par with the goals of the network. So I think we can be 10x better. I think that Filecoin can and should aim to be 10 times greener than what the rest of the industry is aiming for. So that means that our net carbon emissions, whatever we do, we should be able to have negative 10x whatever we use. And I know that it's a super aggressive goal. Like that sounds super intense, but I think you will find that Web3 and crypto gives us the mechanisms and the tooling to create this kind of goal and to achieve it as a whole network pulling together. So things over time, things like RECs and other offsets for all participants will help us get there. So this is not going to be done in isolation and with just our hardware and whatnot. This has to be done as part of members of a much larger economy. And these are, again, not perfect solutions. So think of all of this as iterative over time, starting to improve things, and over time getting to kind of ratchet our way into a much greener future. So here are some ideas that I'll drop on the table, but over time we can discuss later in the day. Things like Filecoin Plus could support Filecoin Green. So things like Filecoin clients could over time choose SPs who score well in Filecoin Green. We can also think of weaving other kinds of incentives directly into Filecoin Green. We could come up with a greenness performance indicator for the whole network. We already can do this for storage providers, but I would love to see it for clients itself and for other participants in the economy. So other groups that are making lots of transactions and so on, being able to kind of estimate their activity. I would love to sort of create whole network KPIs to optimize those kinds of that kind of performance and orient the whole network with incentives to achieve certain targets. I would love to, over time, as the Filecoin network starts gathering back together, have some kind of oracle and verifiable trace of, that describes our impact in the world as we hold those events, and then be able to kind of weave offsets directly into the network. And then I think this is a much harder thing to do, but I think we could totally have an impact here, which is to orient the world towards verifiably green hardware. So start securing the provenance of hardware itself, and that means all of the components and so on, but also create kind of sort of select hardware that has that comes with certification around its level of greenness and so on, and then be able to use that as a component directly into the protocol itself. So being able to kind of check those verifiable claims and whatnot, and gain incentives. Again, all of this is possible and in great thanks to the mechanism design facilities that Web3 gives us. And all of this is about using positive incentives to pave the way towards this much better future. Great. So I'll stop here, and I'll now let all of the other amazing people working on all of this tell you how we're going to get there, how we can make this possible, and so on. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Juan. I think it's just really important for us to examine the why, and you've given us many good reasons why it's critical in us to work on this together and drive forward. So our next group of speakers are going to be talking about the how. First up, we have Alan Ransil, PhD, project lead for the Filecoin Green project, or project lead for Filecoin Green, and also a member of the research team at Protocol Labs. Over to you, Alan.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Juan, for that awesome sort of overall scope for what we're doing. So I'm really going to talk about how the vision that Juan just laid out relates to the tools that we're building, and sort of give you sort of a scaffold to understand the context for all the amazing talks that are about to come. So what is Filecoin Green? So this is a project sort of with these two visions as a sort of guiding principles, right? So how can Web3 and Filecoin specifically become environmentally beneficial? And what tools can we build to do that? And then secondly, how can Web3 and Filecoin especially be used to upgrade environmental accounting, right? How can we do a really good job tracing environmental impacts throughout the Web3 ecosystem, and then beyond that, right? So how can we say, what is, oh no, okay. Screen sharing, one sec. So how can we really, build tools that are going to allow us to, trace environmental impacts throughout supply chains and throughout the economy broadly, right? Because, like Juan said, that is the sort of thing that Web3 should really be able to solve, right? If you content address everything, if you hash link everything, you should be able to say, okay, if this company is an input to my process, or if this product is an input to my process, how do the environmental impacts of all of these inputs translate into what I'm doing, right? And how can I use that information to really understand what my impact is and take actions throughout all of these extended supply chains across the economy to really reduce those impacts? And so where we're starting with this, and the Energy Web Foundation, who you're going to hear from, have been amazing partners in doing this. Where we're starting is by connecting Filecoin to existing renewable energy markets. And so this is sort of a broad schematic of how renewable energy markets work as they exist right now in the economy. So firstly, a solar farm, a wind farm, some other renewable power generator will produce both electrons that go into the grid, and they will produce renewable energy attributes that are tracked in something called a REC registry, so renewable energy registry. And so what Filecoin can do is buy electricity and also buy these renewable energy attributes, these RECs, and verifiably be supporting renewable energy through that. So we did a demo recently in which we worked with a bunch of amazing storage providers who are interested in really leading the way on Filecoin Green and in renewable energy, and worked with Energy Web Zero and a company called 3 Degrees to source renewable energy credits in order to account for the energy use of those storage providers. And so we were able to have them buy renewable energy based on an estimate of how much energy they've used over their entire lifetime in the network so far, and then track that in the Energy Web Zero system, which you're going to hear a lot more about today. And we were able to add that as a link in FilRep. So FilRep is the reputation system, which allows an individual storage provider to show clients why they're the best storage provider to store their files, right? So there are all of these different attributes of a storage provider that are accounted for here. And what we did is we added this renewable energy column to the Filecoin reputation system, right? And so this is a live link, so you can click on this here and say, okay, so this storage provider purchased 168 megawatt hours of renewable electricity. And you can then go and say, okay, on the Energy Web Zero website, and this is all live, this is all real, this is really interfacing with real renewable energy markets. Okay, so this miner ID in the Filecoin network, so that storage provider, purchased 168 RECs in 2021, which equates to 168 megawatt hours of renewable electricity. And you can even look at, okay, where was this renewable energy produced? It was apparently wind. And then you can look at this redemption statement, right, which is this connection to these existing off-chain renewable energy registries, right? So really the question is, right, what Web3 native tools can we build that allow us to interface with renewable energy markets as they currently exist, right? And so that's been sort of a major initiative here. And we are working very hard to scale this up and to open this to every storage provider who wants to participate. So our next phase 2 demo is going to be bigger. We're going to be buying a huge amount of renewable energy and really supporting renewable energy projects throughout the world. This is going to be sort of a more significant revenue stream going to support development of say, solar and wind. And what we can also do, because we have really good, really granular data about exactly how the network is using electricity, at least in time, right? Because storage providers are publishing proofs every day showing exactly how much storage they are storing. We can use that to improve on industry standards for buying renewable energy and matching renewable energy consumption to supply, right? And so what that means in this case is a shorter accounting period. So the industry standard is to buy renewable energy attributes that are produced within this 21-month window, including when you use that energy. We're shortening that. We're targeting 1 month to really say, let's do a better job sort of matching renewable energy consumption to supply, right? And that's really because of the way that the network allows us to work with data in this really sort of verifiable way. And so then a second prong to this is how much energy does Filecoin actually use? And you're going to hear a lot more on work that we're doing from Harold Rankin, who's giving the next talk, to really delve deeply into what are the actual environmental impacts of Filecoin, and what can we do in order to mitigate them. And so I'm going to give you today this sort of sneak preview of this dashboard called the Filecoin Green dashboard that this amazing dev shop called Digital Mob has been building for us. And so what you see here, this data is not sort of finalized yet. There's a couple issues with it, but we're working really quick to fix those up. What you can see is that you can look at the two sort of main drivers of energy use in the Filecoin network, which are data stored and then sealing, so capacity added per day. And you can then see how that translates into energy use. So energy use to seal sectors, we have an upper bound, a lower bound, and an estimate. Then the energy used to actually store data. Again, we have this lower bound, upper bound, and estimate. And then how do those combine at the network level, right? And so what this looks like here is, from our estimate, we think the network is using around 130, 140 megawatt hours today, which the way to sort of think about that is within the realm of data stored online. Filecoin is maybe 0.5% of that and is using about 0.5% of data center energy. So that's roughly in line with what the industry is doing. And so what's also really exciting about this dashboard is you can type in and look at data for individual miner IDs, which is really crucial for this granular vision that we have for how we're going to be understanding the environmental impacts of Filecoin, and then giving people tools to reduce and mitigate them, and ultimately target this sort of verifiably environmentally efficient or verifiably environmentally beneficial network. And so there's a lot happening here, and I really want to thank our amazing partners at Energy Web, who you're going to be hearing more from, and obviously the reputation system team, the Sentinel team, a bunch of people are really working together to make this happen, and we're extremely excited to go forward and improve in all these systems. please join Phil Green on Filecoin Slack. That's a new channel that was created where we're going to announce these new initiatives. And if you also have any questions, feedback, ideas, comments, please DM me. I'm at Alan Ransil on Filecoin Slack. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. We got our world preview of the Filecoin Green dashboard. I didn't know that was coming up, so it's really exciting to see. And I know that so many people have been working so hard on all of these tools and initiatives. But you'll agree with me, it's going to take more people. This is a huge effort that will continue over time. So as Alan said, please join Phil/Green on the Filecoin Slack. Tell us your ideas, share your thoughts on what you've seen today. It's really important that we all kind of like lean in here and get involved. Thank you so much, Alan. That was wonderful. Now, on to something just as important and equally exciting. I'm very delighted to welcome Harold Rankin, the Associate Professor of Computer Science at the Open University of the Netherlands and Radboud University. Today, Harold's going to be talking about estimating Filecoin environmental impacts. A warm welcome to you, Harold. Please take it away. Can we connect you? We got you, Harold. Give us 2 seconds here. Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to talk today on this event. So today I will talk about estimating the Filecoin's environmental impact. So in fact, what happened is we obtained a research grant from Protocol Labs only last week, which we are very happy with, of course. So I will show you today what we're about to do the next 2 years. So there's not any results yet, it's only things to come. So give you an outlook into that. So the actual work will be done by a postdoc researcher, still to be hired. So if you have a good candidate in mind, please drop me a line. That would be very helpful. And next to the postdoc, Alan had a few speaker and myself who will be joining forming this team. So the topic of this project is quite broad. So we look at the footprint of distributed systems that apply consensus mechanisms in general. So Filecoin is of course a prime example of that, but also other systems and consensus mechanisms we intend to explore. So in fact, the first step we will do is we will identify a number of relevant systems with different types of systems, different consensus mechanisms, so that we take a broader view. So it's not just Filecoin. And then the question that we try to answer is, how big is this environmental footprint? And that covers the energy that is being consumed, how green is that, but also the hardware involved and the hardware life cycle. I will show you later on how the way how you operate your consensus mechanism may impact the lifetime of your hardware. So that is the basic question, and then we look at how did this footprint evolve in the past, what is it today, what will it be in the near future, and how can we reduce it. And the approach we intend to take consists of 3 steps. First is creating models to estimate this footprint and to be able to make predictions. Then to do actual measurements to validate the models and also to be able to compare it with other technologies like data centers, for instance. And the third step is to come up with mitigation methods to actually reduce this footprint. So give as an example, I will show here something about Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is, of course, one of the most well-known blockchain applications, and also an example of where quite some work has been done on trying to estimate the footprint. So I guess you all know that Bitcoin uses this proof of work consensus mechanism, which is very energy consuming. And people have done quite some work to try to estimate how big this electricity consumption is. So the first estimates, they stem from 2014, and those were really rough estimates. So there, the guess was it can take 10 megawatts up to 10 gigawatts. So that is quite a big range. And then I published a paper in January 2017, which was one of the first papers which tried to give a more accurate and more precise estimate. And I came up with an estimate of 100 to 500 megawatts. That was in January 2017. And of course, today it's much, much higher. And so these are two pictures that I published in 2017. So that's something from the past. But anyway, the pictures show that here on the left hand, you see in the red the mining revenue, and in green the costs for different types of hardware. So as people moved from CPUs to GPUs, FPGAs to ASIC-based systems, they are able to reduce the energy cost, but they're also forced to do so because if you stick with old technology, you are going to lose money. So you see here the miners are forced to move to new hardware quite fast. And of course, if you buy new hardware, you have to get rid of the old hardware. So that also has an environmental impact. And the right-hand picture, it shows the estimated power usage for different hardware. So at that point in time, people were using ASICs, and of course they had to do that to be to make money. And the picture shows that if people would have been still using CPUs, had to do the same amount of computations as they did, then they would even consume way more electricity than the world was producing at that time. So that really shows how big this went off. So at the moment, the estimate as given by the Cambridge colleagues is 11.9 gigawatts. So that's really a big increase since 2017. So this is the situation for Bitcoin. And if you look, so not only at the electricity consumption, but on the footprint in general, and basically also the CO2 emission to produce electricity. Then also there has been, as quite some work has been done. You find some good papers on that, but unfortunately also quite some papers who actually lack scientific rigor and use really inaccurate data. And also in well-respected journals. So an example is shown here from Nature Climate Change. So people from Hawaii, they published an article stating that Bitcoin mining alone would push the global warming up by 2 degrees, so beating the Paris climate, which is of course very alarming. But unfortunately, they made quite some mistakes in their work. So actually, they had many flaws, and we published an update on that, showing that their estimates are really wrong. So in a sense, it's a pity that papers show up in prestigious journals making false claims. But still, they make claims and show that there is a problem, and we're able to correct that afterwards. So that is on the CO2 footprint. If you look at the hardware, had a life cycle assessment, that basically is still completely missing also for Bitcoin. So this is the situation for Bitcoin. As I showed, quite some work has been done and is going on. For most other cryptocurrencies and other blockchain-based systems, there are even no models at all, or no measurements. So Filecoin, as Alan just showed, is one of the examples where things are going on, but for many others, it's still completely missing. So definitely there is a gap to fill and also to do things better, as shown here on this slide. So what can you do to try to reduce the footprint? Well, the obvious thing is to transition to another consensus mechanism with a smaller footprint. And this footprints can take different forms. So if you look at energy, then the goal could be to consume less energy. And the obvious thing is then to move away from proof of work to proof of stake, like Ethereum is doing. But that's not always feasible. So for Bitcoin, that would not work, because Bitcoin is based on this proof of work, which requires ASIC-based systems, dedicated hardware. So if you would move to proof of stake, you have to throw away all that hardware, which is, of course, a huge waste of capital. So that's not really feasible. And also, if you move to another algorithm, then it may also impact trustworthiness and security. So not thing to take lightly. So another line of thought is, okay, well, let's not try to focus on reducing the amount of energy. That may not be even possible, as just explained. But then you can still try to move to green energy. So not reducing the complete amount of energy, but at least make it green. And yeah, so then is the question, how do you facilitate that or even enforce that? And how can you verify that? So that is, of course, another interesting question. And the third aspect is to focus on the hardware. And also there, the consensus mechanism plays a big role. For instance, you have Shia's network, and that advertises as a green mining solution. But that has been shown to strain actually the hard drives quite hard, which reduces their lifetime. And so there, what you gain is, okay, it's more green in energy-wise, but on the other hand, you have to pay with hardware costs. And of course, hardware also have embodied energy and impact on the environment. So you have to look at the complete picture and at different aspects. That's actually what we are going to trying to do. And so we have this three-step approach. We start with making models of estimating and predicting this footprint. Then we do measurements to validate the models, and then we can update them. So this is a loop. And then also we propose measures to mitigate that, to actually reduce this footprint. And that, of course, will help us also to improve the models and so on. So that is the things that we intend to do. So yeah, to give you a glimpse of the ideas that we have in mind. So if you look at how you can create models, there are basically two approaches. Either you do it bottom up, and bottom up means try to find out where miners are located on Earth, what hardware do they use, how efficient is this hardware, how much hardware do they use, and what energy mix do they use to power this hardware. So if you look that up for individual miners, sum that up, then you get a global picture. The other approach is top-down, so that you say, okay, let's look at the algorithm as a starting point. What are the key parameters? What resources are required to run this algorithm? So then you get a model, and then in this model, then you can connect to distributions for location, hardware mix, energy mix, and then you can look at different scenarios. So that allows you to come up with lower and upper bounds. And if you combine this bottom-up and this top-down approach, then you get a more realistic scenario in between this bottom, the lower and upper bounds. And in addition, you also then need, or we plan to create models on hardware usage for mining, do life cycle assessments, and also look at things like power user efficiency, this PUE value, which also plays an impact. So then on the measuring, so to validate our models, we plan to look at literature to get data, to contact miners, manufacturers, and also to actually do measurements for different types of things. Of course, very interesting is what already is ongoing, as well as being the Green Hash Rate initiative in the Crypto Climate Accord, where the idea is to do local measurements at the miners. So when they run the hardware, then you measure how much electricity is being consumed, and you connect that to the power companies to also get an idea of the power of the energy mix that is used to generate this electricity. So this ongoing work, we intend to take that a step further. And one of the ideas is to have a blockchain-based system where miners can register their location, their hardware, the energy mix. That can be a separate blockchain or part of the actual blockchain of the application. And then, of course, various challenges. So how do you prove, how can you prove all that for verification? And also you have various other properties that you want to keep, like anonymity of miners, security of the data that's stored on blockchain. So those things you also have to consider to make this acceptable solution. And then the last step is to mitigate. So the idea is not as much to come up with completely new algorithms, but more try to slightly adjust existing algorithms and to make transition to this kind of things quite easy. And one of the things you could do is, for instance, to add a proof to each miner block to state the energy mix used to mine the block. So, for instance, that could be referring to renewable energy certificates. So that allows, of course, also for measuring, but also for mitigating, because you could agree on that you only accept a block on a blockchain if some X% at least as free energy has been used to mine this block. Of course, it also can be connected to the reputation system, as the previous talks show, so that you feed this renewable energy usage into a reputation system, and then clients can use or can prefer nodes that have better uses of renewable energy. And then the last part also is to consider the hardware aspects. So how is hardware resources being used in consensus algorithms, and how are recycling strategies being considered? Okay, so this is gives you a glimpse of what we are about to do. So if you want to hear more about this, please reach out to me. And also, if you have suitable poster candidates in mind, please give us it. Okay, thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Harold. That was absolutely fascinating. And, your groundbreaking work on estimating crypto energy will be the foundation for building models to understand Filecoin's impact moving forward. So really, really incredible stuff. If you're excited, if you're sitting here going, wow, I really want to get involved, then please come and join us on the Phil-Green Slack, on Filecoin Slack, the Phil-Green channel. Also, if you're interested in the postdoc role that Harold mentioned, we can share details there as well. If you know great candidates, send them Harold's way. All right, thank you so much, Harold. Our next speakers are Clara So, a director and founding officer of the Filecoin Foundation, and Megan Kleiman, who is also a founding officer of the Filecoin Foundation. As we all know, there are many groups working in the ecosystem on these projects and initiatives, and the Filecoin Foundation is one of them. So today they'll be sharing the Filecoin Foundation's vision for environmental sustainability. Warm welcome, Clara and Megan.
Thank you so much, Angie, and happy birthday, Filecoin. Hopefully next year we can celebrate Filecoin again, this time as the greenest blockchain available, with all of your guys' support in helping collaborate with all of us from the ecosystem. So as Angie mentioned, for those unaware, the Filecoin Foundation is an independent organization dedicated to developing Filecoin and related technologies and to oversee long-term governance of the Filecoin network. And we've been around as a concept since the Filecoin white paper in 2017, but we really stepped up and grew our team a little over a year ago, where today we oversee grants, collaboration with storage providers, the Filecoin Improvement Proposal research, programs like Filecoin Plus, and much more. And we have also worked to ensure that we can achieve the greenest and most sustainable blockchain community in the best way, to not only be neutral, but as Juan said, net carbon negative. So there's a number of things that we'll dive into in the second half of our talk that dives into that. So today, I did want to share a little bit about who we are, and then also ways that we're collaborating. So today at the foundation, we have worked on a lot of efforts to bring together the storage provider community, which is an important part of this green initiative. From starting the storage provider working group to funding tooling and grants, we are trying to do this all in thinking about operations in the most carbon neutral way. And to do this, we must map a path. And so as we approach the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow next month, many industries today are thinking about their environmental practice, their impacts, and how we can contribute towards a more sustainable focus. And as Juan has already mentioned, the Filecoin network is used for storing files, safeguarding those files, and by periodically verifying that they remain stored in good condition. And so a lot of talk today, as several others like Harold just mentioned, use a different incentive structure. The energy used in Filecoin is to achieve a particular societal benefit. For Filecoin, the benefits are really in creating a decentralized storage network, which competes with big tech monopolies. And we believe all of us in this ecosystem can be the foundation of a better internet. Bitcoin's incentive structure, in contrast, ends up increasing energy consumption as mining becomes harder and more competitive, which has sparked widespread global concern. And in fact, in contrast, Filecoin's focus has been on incentivizing high capacity storage and high quality service offerings. And this approach helps us scale by providing meaningful work in which greener options are available in our process. And as an ecosystem, there's growing awareness among cryptocurrency and blockchain stakeholders, whether these are exchanges, storage providers, regulators, or the developer community, of our shared responsibility in addressing crypto's impact on the climate. And so these solutions will really require improvements in technology and process, and of course, in governance. So when we first built the first computer, it was the size of an entire room, but over time, technology became more scalable, and the developer of transistors and IC chips allowed us to shrink computers and make them available in every home and every pocket. And frequently, as energy consumption grows, as our demand for computing power increases, we need better hardware and software to mitigate this problem. And we must enhance the system's efficiency so we can achieve the same services for less energy input. And we've seen this really come to be with COVID and the amount of time people are spending on technology services today. Recently, we've seen major cryptocurrencies attempting to switch over to less intense infrastructures. So for example, Ethereum's efforts to shift towards proof of stake rather than proof of work. That kind of change is important and we believe a step in the right direction. Transparency and collaboration are other two keystones in achieving sustainability. And transparency means having clear, reliable, and science-based processes for estimating our impact. This allows us to understand our environmental footprint, identify areas for improvement, and also measure our progress over time. And we can also share this results with others so we can make similar improvements. And here's how we're achieving all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor to my co-founder, Megan, to dive into some of the initiatives that we're working with at the foundation. So Megan, turn it over to you.
Cool. Thanks so much, Sarah. And just to take a step back for 1 second before I dive into what we're doing at the foundation right now, I think that like this question about the blockchain community and Filecoin in particular coming together to be thinking about our environment, like to me, like a lot of the reasons that a lot of us get involved in decentralization is because we want to create the kind of robust networks that can withstand this test of time. And so, you know, if we're thinking about these like long-term timescales, right? If we're thinking about trying to store humanity's most important knowledge on the 10,000 year timescale, you know, when like centralized servers can rise and fall, then it seems sort of crazy to not also be thinking about the world that we're going to live in during that time scale. So it feels like a very obvious, like hand-in-hand thing that we would be thinking about how to decarbonize and how to create, you know, be making sure that we are also building the world that we want to live in at the same time that we're building, you know, the access to information that we want people to have in these like longer term timescales. So things the Filecoin Foundation is doing right now to support these efforts. We recently became a supporter of the Crypto Climate Accord, following and inspired by Protocol Labs becoming a supporter of this initiative. So what this means is that we're making a public commitment to designing scalable solutions to create, carbon negative ways for the blockchain community to operate, and also to enhance our transparency around energy usage. There's over 150 other supporters, like I said, including Protocol. And this initiative was modeled after the Paris Climate Accord. So I think it's a really exciting public commitment to what we want to be doing in the long term. We're also working on sponsoring grants for our storage provider community to be able to pilot some of these ways of using entirely renewable energy, and be able to use these case studies as things that we can then roll out to the storage provider community at large. And we're also working with Protocol Labs and ways of integrating these green Filecoin initiatives with Filecoin Plus, so we can always be thinking about, in the long scale, how the Filecoin network is incentivizing all of our participants to be, working not just for the good of the network and for their individual good, but also for the good of the environment as a whole. And I think I will keep it short since we're a little over time and get us back on track.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Megan and Clara. Really wonderful to hear about all of the work going on over at the Filecoin Foundation, and I'm sure that there's more coming. If you'd like to learn more about all of the great work of the foundation, but specifically the green initiatives, then you can check it out at phil.org. Okay, coming up next, I'm really excited to introduce some of our original partners in the Green Filecoin, or original collaborators in the Green Filecoin project. Many months ago, when we were first discussing the initial steps and what we could do, we came across the work of the incredibly talented folks at the Energy Web Foundation. We just knew that we had to work with them. So we got on a call and some magic happened. So it gives me a huge amount of pleasure to introduce some of the folks from there. Today we have Miriam Ruslanova, who's the Traceability Business Lead. We have Andres Schoendub, who is the Zero Engagement Associate. And we also have Daniel Lopez, who's the Senior Product Manager. And they're going to talk to us about Energy Web Zero. Take it away, folks.
Great, thank you so much for the warm welcome introduction. Super happy to be here. Very proud to be partners with Protocol Labs and Filecoin. We actually do not have Daniel physically with us, but his heart is with us. He's a bit sick, so it's me and Andres. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. So on our agenda today, we'll introduce ourselves really briefly and how we relate to the Crypto Climate Accord. And then we'll dive into one of the specific work streams at Energy Web Foundation, a project called Zero, where Protocol Labs is a very active partner and contributor. And we'll take a step back and look generally at how our technology stack has been applied with traceability in the traceability domain. And then to finish off our presentation, Andres will walk through a demo of a prototype and the experience that the storage providers can expect in the first versions of Zero. All right, so very quickly about ourselves. In addition to being a partner of Protocol Labs and Filecoin, we're a nonprofit foundation, and we build publicly accessible, so open source software tools, mainly revolving around blockchain and decentralized tech. That's the first thing. The second thing is we also lead a huge community of different energy and technology companies to understand their requirements and build the technology together to make sure that everything that we build and that's available to the public actually meets the requirements of the participants from the energy sector. So if you look at the technology stack that we're building, you see here a quick snapshot. It can be a bit confusing, but where we are active is the purple boxes. So our technology stack mainly consists of our own chain called Energy Web Chain. That's a proof of authority with 40 validators coming from the energy space. We have the utility component, so basically the tools that make it easier to use our chain and build dApps on top. And then we have the software development toolkits, or the SDKs. And those are software tools that help build dApps in specific use cases. And one of them is the renewable energy traceability that we will cover today. And then here's a snapshot of our community. Some of the names might be familiar to you, like Volkswagen, Shell, NG, etc. So in addition to having the community and building the tech, we also launched a crypto climate accord initiative that my colleague Sheena will be talking about slightly later. The idea is to set decarbonization targets for the crypto industry and make sure that there are more and more players like the Filecoin and Protocol Labs out there. So in the spirit of this initiative and our active work within the traceability domain, we started working on a project called Zero. And I will jump into describing the project briefly in a second. But before that, I'd like to do a little exercise for everyone who's on the line. And for that, you would just need to use your fingertips and the chat box. I'd like to understand the level of awareness or familiarity with traceability and why it's important to track renewable electricity. So if you can input your answer A, B, C, D, and there can be more than one answer in the chat box, that would be great. So why is it important to track electricity? Once it enters the grid, it's impossible to track it back. Tracking electricity helps governments and others to achieve their targets, and consumers actually want to see the origin or none of the above. So if you can go ahead and put a letter or several letters in the chat box, that would be great. Thanks, Alan, for being the first. So we have already some responses. All right, I'll give 5 more seconds. And the correct answers are A, B, and C. So great job, everyone. So basically, the purpose of tracking the origin of electricity has many, many different angles. And one of them, which is very important, is to show to the environmentally conscious consumers that also relates to the Filecoin network where the energy is coming from, and to make sure that the renewable energy can be attributed to the consumption, to your consumption. So that's where the concept of renewable energy certificate comes in. So when you track the origin of electricity, you need a certificate that actually has all the information about the plant, the generating plant, where the electricity has been produced, how much, at which point of time. And so these instruments are super useful for policymakers to track progress, to incentivize renewable energy consumption, and also are useful for companies seeking to greenify their electricity consumption and show that they are reducing their environmental impact. So RECs actually are quite common around the globe, and they have different names like GOs in Europe, IRECs in the rest of the world, NFCs in Japan, etc. But it's essentially the same mechanism. It's a certificate certifying the unit of energy and where it's coming from. So we have another exercise, and this is the last one for today, I promise. By procuring RECs, what can storage providers claim? And here we have 4 response options. Again, it's just like the last time, and you can choose more than one answer. So can they claim that this renewable electricity was physically delivered to the storage provider? Can they claim that this electricity is attributed to their consumption? Can they claim that they have fully decarbonized all of their operations, so basically achieved net zero, or none of the above? And I can see chat in a moment for some reason. It looks like we have a consensus. So it's most people think it's B. There is one response about the C, and the correct answer is B. So why C is not the correct answer? The caveat here is all, right? So by procuring RECs, you're covering your electricity consumption, which is the majority of your carbon footprint. But as what we saw from the research project presented earlier, there are also other emissions that are coming out from your operations. That could be, for example, the hardware. So RECs cover the majority portion of the electricity, but not everything, if that makes sense. Great. So now, as we are familiar with the concept of RECs, it's time to look at the Project Zero, which, in simple terms, would be a global decentralized hub for posting your renewable energy supply and also being able to find, compare, and source renewable energy. And we're starting with the simplest concept in the renewable energy world, which are the RECs that we have seen already. And this slide just shows how Zero becomes this hub that connects different types of renewable energy suppliers and different types of renewable energy buyers. So with the help of the CCA, we are covering a lot of the crypto buyers, but Zero, of course, can be also used by other organizations or even individuals. And the whole idea for creating Zero is to provide this user-friendly, transparent, and verifiable way to procure renewable energy and be able to report your progress. And as simple as it sounds, there hasn't been a tool like that out there, and there hasn't been a platform that's shared and trusted by different stakeholders all around the world. And actually, Alan here knows this firsthand. That being said, when we take a step back and see, so why did we even think about traceability in the first place and Zero with decentralized technology? The answer is pretty complex, but to simplify, in the market of renewable energy, traceability and other decarbonization products, there needs to be trust, and there needs to be a shared platform between different market participants, as well as efficiency in terms of costs and speed, because of the number of transactions, volume, and different geographies. And for this reason, decentralized tech actually offers a really suitable solution to the problem. And our vision is to design Zero and our tools to make sure that we cover the entire life cycle, so the end-to-end of renewable energy procurement, and specifically starting from RECs, where we create the digital identities for everyone who participates on the supply and the demand side. Make sure that we document every unit of energy. We document the change of ownership, and also we capture when the certificate is used for consumption purposes, right? And that the certificate cannot move to anybody else any longer or cannot be double counted. So this was the aspiration behind our work in traceability and application of blockchain and other decentralized tech in this space. That being said, now I'm giving the space to Andres, who will walk us through the prototype.
Great,
all right.
Thank you, Miriam. So let me just quickly share my screen and ready. So welcome to Zero. As Miriam said, this is only a preview. We're still working on it. It's wireframes that have been designed by our team, but just so that you have a wider understanding of how Zero is going to look like, here's the landing page. So a storage provider interested in sourcing renewables from Zero would come into a page as this one. And some of the figures or wording that you'll see here are placeholders, but we hope that this gives you an idea. So again, it's the landing page. If a storage provider wants to source renewables, you'd probably go into the specific crypto user journey that we've built along with Protocol Labs. So once you click on it, you have the opportunity to actually choose different protocols. So here you can already see Bitcoin and you can see Filecoin as well. And once you choose Filecoin, you have a different look, something closer to home, probably. But once you go further, you'd be able to add your information. And this is a key part. So in this section here, you're already seeing that you can provide a miner ID, you can provide a country, a specific region, a generation and start date and end date, and you can do this for many regions. Now, once you enter this this information, you send out a request to Zero, which then matches that request. Some options you can actually hint out to the supplier that you are willing to do wire transfer. Traditional energy suppliers work with invoicing systems, but maybe some of them will be encouraged to accept crypto payments. So that's another interesting opportunity that we're actually encouraging. And yeah, before sending the request, you can confirm. Here's a small summary of the regions, the energy amount that you want to procure or source. And yeah, once you send that request, Zero would actually receive that offer, as you are seeing now in this screen, and would match it. So now you have this wireframe where you see a supplier, in this case John Smith, who's supplying renewable energy certificates from France, and it's 3 megawatt hours at a specific price. And you have the opportunity or the option to decline or accept the offer. This is a short summary of the information, and it's not as detailed as we want it to be. In the future, we'd encourage suppliers, or in the next versions, we want suppliers to post as much as information as they can related to their devices. So in that way, you can know where the devices are, what if they're supporting specific causes, or if they have higher impact than just traditional hydro, for instance. And well, moving on forward, once you accept the offer, you actually have the ability to either choose crypto, or you can actually do both, but you can say, yeah, you'd be connected with the supplier. You'd be giving him the information about the payment method that you'd be interested in having, and then you'd submit that information. And once it's submitted, you'd actually, sorry about that, I'm having trouble with yeah, you'd actually be matched, and Zero would match that request. And here what you're now seeing is once the match is done and the certificates are transferred, as Alan already showed you, you have these pages where you as a storage provider would come in and navigate through the supply or the certificates that have been delivered towards your way. As Alan already mentioned, he pointed out that there's several information about the supplier address, the country where you sourced energy from, the energy source, and this is all great information right now. These pages are currently live, and this is what we have been working on. But for the next iterations with Protocol Labs, our goal is to have something like this. Again, you'll actually go through the crypto journey that we just showed you. So that's going to be something new, additional, that we didn't have in our first iteration. But besides this, now the goal is to have the blockchain proof. So not only will you have the redemption statements that are linked to the certificate registries, but you'll also have the verifiable record of the transaction that happened on chain. And this is where our future vision and our next iteration is going to. And so as of now, the pages are live, but our next work will focus on having this information recorded on chain and having the storage providers that will join this next round go through the crypto journey. And if you're interested in learning more about the tools that we are building, and you're interested in contributing into shaping up this journey, Zero in general, we'd be happy to connect. Your ideas can help us build this tool in a better way so that it can actually meet your requirements and needs. And yeah, we'd be really happy to speak out with you. So I'll actually pause here, and we have like 2 minutes or possibly a bit more. So just wanted to know if there's any questions at this point that we might be able to answer. No, it seems no, isn't any questions. Well, if you have one, feel free to send them along. I think that's all from our part. We're very, very excited and looking forward for the next iteration and working together with Protocol Labs. Thank you very much, and I hope this short glimpse gives you a wide idea of what Zero is all about. Thank you.
Just absolutely amazing, Miriam and Andres, and obviously love to your colleague as well. I hope he feels better soon. You're just doing incredible work in the space, not just with Filecoin, but with many other projects. And yeah, like I said earlier, when we kind of came across your work and learned about it, it was so compelling and exciting. And you're definitely, you know, leading the charge in this space. So yes, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. And I'm sure lots of people here do have questions, but it's just it's so new and there's so much to it. So if you want to get stuck in, if you want to dive in, if you want to kind of go back through everything, then please check out the energyweb.org website. You can learn all about the work that they do with Filecoin, but more generally as well in the space. Perhaps that you're working on other projects where you think you could integrate some of the tooling, reach out to them. They're just fantastic humans and absolutely brilliant engineers and product folks. And as I said, it's just been an absolute pleasure for us to work with your team. And we're looking forward to more collaborations. Okay. Next up, I'm very, very excited. So about a year ago, I was hosting I was hosting Filecoin Liftoff, but just prior to that, we ran the Filecoin Incentivized Testnet, which was called Space Race. As you know, we love everything space themed over at Protocol Labs. So we ran the Incentivized Testnet, and as part of that, we organized a number of different community events, and it was just wonderful to get to know the many folks across the world who were for working on Filecoin, contributing to the ecosystem, and driving the network forward. And I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome back folks who I consider old friends today. They are a group of storage providers from across the world who have made a pledge to environmental sustainability as a core part of their vision. The first panelist I'd like to welcome is Kevin Wynn, who is the founder of Picnic. Hello, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure, pleasure. Great to see you. Our second panelist is Alex Altman, who is the COO of Seal Storage. A warm welcome to you, Alex.
Hey, thank you, Angie. Nice to meet you.
Hey. Our third panelist is Benjamin Hloshko, who is an independent storage provider. Ben, how are you doing?
Good.
Ben, did I pronounce it correctly? I do it wrong every time. I think I've done it about 7 times. Okay. I've never quite got it right.
No, it's fine. Not so
awesome. Easy. Good to see you. Okay, and our fourth panelist is Devin Johnson. Devin is the founder of SoulCap. A warm welcome to you, Devin.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And finally, Charles Cow, the founder of Swan Cloud. Welcome to the panel, Charles.
Hi, everyone.
Awesome. So I'd love to kick off by asking each of our panelists in the order in which I introduced you to just give a brief intro to your storage provider business, setup, and how you're thinking about environmental sustainability. Kevin, can you start us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having us here. Picnic's really fortunate to be one of the storage providers who joined just around the late testnet period. We're based out of San Diego, California, with infrastructure footprints in San Diego, in Las Vegas, and upcoming in London. Our team's about 20 FTs of massive Filecoin and IPFS enthusiasts. And one of the places where we started the whole company it was just a hobby where, quite frankly, out of a home environment, we racked one side of the house with solar panels, and we thought this was kind of a cool way to empower a hobby miner. Because quite frankly, so the co-founders of Picnic and I come from immigrant families, and we were always families in third world countries, villagers that depended on Mother Nature, living by the sun, living by the moon and the waters for sustainability. Well, for us now, based out of the United States, and fortunate enough to play as technologists and futurists, it just made sense that we stuck to our roots from our familial heritage, making sure that everything we do with new and cool technologies as we store data was never going to impact Mother Nature for those who do live by Mother Nature. So our company, again, started as really just a hobby around the testnet period with those solar panels. But as we continued to grow as a firm and formalize and start to go after real storage clientele, it just made a lot of sense that we stuck true to those roots. Not only is it a differentiator to be green, to call yourself green, but to really go after, for ethical reasons, green that is not carbon neutral, but as Juan kept mentioning, beyond carbon neutral. In fact, Picnic is working on an initiative internally where we hope to be green 24/7, solar power that's captured during the day and stored in lithium ion to kind of empower our systems through the night. So that it's almost off-grid, behind the grid. And that's just where we feel like this is how Filecoin is so different from other blockchains. It makes total sense to use Web3 tech to be the authority for green and efforts there, but it allows Filecoin as an ecosystem to be differentiator that all the mainstream objections to proof of work and wasteful cryptocurrencies, wasteful blockchain networks, Filecoin could be so much different. Really starting with the sealing process and the proof of space, really requiring a lot of compute power. If we can capture all of that in green ways, Filecoin would be a leader, and is the leader of the Web3 space. So that's how we're thinking about green and how we're going to continue to be green going forward.
Well, that's amazing and just fascinating to kind of get the background there. I've heard from a lot of folks, and I do remember a lot of folks started as hobbyists, and then suddenly, this became a business, and it's wonderful to hear that you're kind of sticking to your core values. And I it's absolutely true to say that many of the people on this panel were like the OGs of Green Filecoin. You were doing things before, we had necessarily started moving in that direction. So it's wonderful to kind of hear your story. Thank you so much for sharing. Alex, can I invite you to share a bit more about your SP business and how you're thinking about sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. So Seal Storage Technology is a storage provider based out of Canada, but with a team all across North America. It was created about 8 months ago with the management team out of Validation Capital, which is a crypto proof of stake validator company, and another group in Toronto. Our CTO is actually a fellow named Jacques Swanpool, who was part of Space Race, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know him. He's very active in the Slack channels. Who was also, very early in that, just at Space Race and creating a miner there and doing a video early in the year. So our team right now is about 10, and we'd really like to become one of the larger storage miners or storage providers here in North America and expand globally after that. And when it comes to sustainability, it's a big passion of mine and the team as well. And we look at a lot of discussions around what was going on with Bitcoin mining and the perception that it created for all cryptocurrencies and all different blockchain networks and technologies, even though that's not necessarily true, right? When you look at things like Filecoin and other networks, there's really a big difference between how they interact with environmental concerns, right? Even something like Filecoin in the storage space, there's a lot of different ways that we interact with our machines, kind of reducing e-waste because there's a longer lifetime. For us, looking at renewable energy data centers, or if we can't get 100%, and looking at RECs and where those RECs are sourced and how that interacts with our systems. And for us, we've got our operations set up in Quebec and Nevada, so both sides of the border, as I said, in renewable energy data centers there. From a longer term sustainable goals, we'd like to start off at net zero, and it's something that we thought, being a newer company, we had the opportunity to start in the right place. We'd like to get to a point where we actually get to something that we either call net zero plus or carbon negative, which is using our proceeds to be able to fund restoration projects or carbon offsets, things that we look at and say, how can we be something that's a little bit different, right? Web3 is really a different type of technology, a different type of world that we're creating here, and we want to try to do something that's beyond that and kind of work both ways. So that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. That's great. And again, like you said, you're a small company. You want to start from the beginning, like getting on board with this stuff as you grow and scale is really exciting. And Web3 offers us those opportunities. Juan referred to it in his talk earlier. We suddenly have access to so many opportunities, initiatives, people as well, like all of the amazing people that we have here today. So yeah, no, great. Thank you so much for kind of sharing your story. We're going to dig in a little bit more shortly, but I'm going to move on to Ben. Ben, tell us a little bit more about your setup and how you're approaching sustainability, please.
Yeah, so I'm here as an independent miner, and actually I'm also an advisor to Picnic. So I know all about the projects going on at Kevin's side, but my setup is a bit different because I'm not in a big data center. So what I've been working on is, well, on one side is like being emission free and how do you get the clean energy. But actually also what happens to the energy that I'm using. So because I'm not in a big data center, I have the opportunity to actually use the energy that is kind of done in my miner. So what I do instead is, I think already back in Space Race, I did a video where there was some funny pictures of water cooling going everywhere. Basically, it's still like that. So my office floor is basically heated from GPUs and CPUs. So it's keeping the office warm. And then to capture all the excess heat coming from hard drives and so on, everything that can't be captured with the water, then basically that is kind of sucked out of the room, all the hot air, and then enters into like circulate into the rest of the building. So I'm really trying to see, if I know that most of this will happen in big data centers, and big data centers will have a problem with where the energy goes. So normally it just goes out as hot air. But I'm really looking into, could there be more sustainable ways of making sure that once we are using this green energy, then, make it count for more than just one usage. Yeah, so that's kind of my way into it. But I'm at a much smaller size, so that's why it makes sense to do it like this compared to a big data center. But I think it's important to look at all these different stages, like how do we get the power, but also now that we are actually using electricity, are we sure that we're also using it for something beneficial, if possible?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. Like there is a kind of pipeline here. It's not just we build tools and then it's X. Like there are many, many different ways that we can work together. Again, I think it was mentioned in a couple of the talks. Juan talked about it as well. Greenifying Filecoin isn't just one initiative or one set of tools. It's many different things. So yeah, I think that's a great point. I do remember your very famous underfloor heating. I think some people were bothering you for the specs afterwards. They were trying to get their own offices heated with their Filecoin rings. But no, like just absolutely amazing. What a kind of brilliant initiative, and I remember being delighted by it, but also just thinking, what a clever way, especially as an independent miner, to kind of grasp, like take those fundamentals and put them into kind of real action. And I bet it's great in the winter as well. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ben. Next up, Devin, tell us about what SolCap are up to and kind of how you're approaching sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for having me. So basically what SolCap is trying to do is we are trying to basically put the data centers as close as we can to the solar, to the energy source, whatever it may be. Currently we actually can announce today finally that we have a project that should be up and coming here by Q1 2022 for a 50 petabyte fully solar array. It'll be powered by batteries at night. There is a backup connection to the grid, of course, but otherwise it's 100% green energy, 100% sustainable. And from there, our goal is over the next 3 to 4 years is to put up about 19 more of these sites. Other than that, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to be the bridge between some of these less green companies, oil companies. That's really the big one. Another big one that we are involved with would be I guess would be the paper industry, the paper mills, timber industry, whatever you want to call that. And so traditionally, these companies aren't really green companies per se, but what they can do is they can move their data storage to a greener option. So they do have that option for their scorecard. They can get that green, even if, an oil company is never going to be a green company. A company that chops down trees and makes paper is never going to be a green company, but they still can do what they can to, make the world a better place and to make it a greener place. And that's kind of our goal, is to connect those types of people with our company. And it's really a 3-pronged thing. So number one is we needed to figure out a way to get the solar. So luckily we've teamed up with a couple of great people. They're silent partners right now, but this will be in the very, very near future. We'll have some really exciting announcements about it. But we've got some companies out of South Carolina. We've got the energy, and it's looking like we may even have some excess energy to where we can actually sell back to the Filecoin community in the form of REX to encourage other people to kind of go this green route as well. And then, of course, the final one, I believe that Benjamin mentioned, the waste heat thing. We're doing some really interesting things. We're in some really interesting talks with some good people in the industry of that. And the goal is to get about the 10 to 15% efficiency back into the systems, rather than this waste heat just going away completely. And I mean, overall, that's the goal, is cleaner, greener Filecoin. And I think what sets us apart there is that we've got the solar panels right there on site. We're bringing in the modular data centers and setting them up right next to it. And we can do this with, wind energy. We can do this with solar. There's even some talks with some green gas companies that are very exciting and up and coming. Yeah, so just look out for us in the future. It's all green. Thank you.
Amazing. I love it, Devin. A cleaner, greener Filecoin, quite right. And yeah, again, good to hear that you're looking at addressing that kind of heat waste side of the funnel, because I think that's something that isn't talked about as much, but definitely is very, very important. would love you if you can, if you've got announcements that have just been made, if you want to share the links in the chat as well. I think everyone would be excited to take a peek, and we'll keep an eye out for future announcements as well. Thank you so much. And take us home, Charles. If you can tell us a little bit about your operation and how you are addressing sustainability.
Yes, so I'm Charles. We are a company located in Quebec, Canada. We are started the business from the test night. So doing working as a storage provider. Currently, we have growing from a small team to a team have more than 20 employees distributed in North America and Asia. So we recently get lots of service requests from all over the world. We get clients from China. We get clients from US. We also have a large amount of clients in Canada market. Quebec is one of the best place to provide green energy because we are using hydro Quebec. So all the energy comes from water, so it's renewable energy. We host it in one of the highest standard data centers in Montreal, cost efficiency, and we also using some service providing for not just storage, but also provide service for deep learning industry. We have companies interested in using we use some GPUs currently are using for Filecoin and storage seeding process to converting some of them to provide a deep learning. So this is quite amazing. So our team is half of the team is focused on providing storage solution to better use those storage and the process. On the other side, we're also building the software team to doing how to use those storage for computing purpose. So we participate all the screenshot from 1.1 to 2.6, and then we get lots of tools development to provide the IPFS service as well. So we can use the bandwidth, storage, GPU, everything. So in this case, I believe that in the future, we have more opportunity to working with different teams and different companies, especially high-tech companies, so they can move their calculation and their storage from some not so environment friendly location to Canada.
I love it. We're all moving to Canada. Yeah, no, that's great, and it's good. Again, kind of those geographic considerations. Obviously, Filecoin is a global network, but it's important for folks to understand the benefits of different different locations and kind of how that can contribute to kind of their greenification. So yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Charles. I'm going to go back through in the same order, if that's okay with everyone, and just ask a little bit about your conversations. So if you store data for clients, does environmental sustainability play a role in your talks with them? Kevin, do you want to kick off? Is that a kind of conversation that you're now having?
Yeah, absolutely. When you say environmental sustainability and storing for clients or potential clients, that definitely comes up. I think all of the storage providers here would agree that there's this entire pitching process to explain to a potential storage customer what is Filecoin. And when the word blockchain or cryptocurrency inevitably comes up, there's these preconceived notions of Filecoin being some other proof of work like a network. And before that permanently taints the initial pitch, Picnic has to make sure, explain that the compute intensive piece really occurs during the initial onboarding process or the sealing of that capacity and or the ingestion of that data. Then we explain that there's, the perks and benefits of Filecoin based storage. It's really, there's a little bit of that compute through the concept of the window post, the proof of space time that happens every 24 hours. That then becomes a little bit more palatable. As Picnic continues to pursue university clients in the United States, what we find is explaining that Picnic does everything that it can, and Filecoin as an overall ecosystem is working on green. By that, we mean that compute intensive stage, that ingestion of data is offset by whatever the gold standards today, although they're not sufficient, at least working in enterprise facilities that do focus on powering 100% of their daytime use with solar power. And then Picnic explaining that one of its goals as an individual company is to pursue renewable battery sources throughout the 24-hour period, even at sundown. That ends up becoming a differentiator, as I mentioned previously. And so, yes, environmental sustainability absolutely plays a role in the talks because of the fact that there are these preconceived notions when it comes to blockchain. So again, it's just a matter of telling that story to these potential clients that the company started with these off-grid routes as a more humble hobby, and then now at enterprise scale, the United States is a little bit behind when it comes to turning data centers fully green. When they claim 100% green, it's generally offset by kicking the can down the road with RECs. But saying that we as a company, as Picnic, are working on 100% renewable 24/7, a standard that doesn't exist today, it ends up being something that is important to those potential clients, and hopefully will be a differentiator that allows those clients to actually accept Filecoin as the kind of the fundamental basis technology we're using to store their data.
Yeah, that's awesome, and definitely kind of what we've heard. What about yourself, Alex? Is this something that's been coming up in conversations with clients?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at potential clients, we have to look at our own kind of global emission standards and scope 1, 2, and 3, and how that affects us as a company. So when we're looking at potential clients to onboard, we have to see, what kind of business are these people doing, how are they interacting with that, and what are their standards as a company. And this again goes back to a number of people here have mentioned geographical standards. I know the US is quite behind someone like Europe, who's quite ahead of what seems like the rest of the world, Canada being somewhere close to the US. So looking at where these clients are located and what type of mandates they've got coming down from the top, whether it's shareholders or stakeholders, or if it's a public enterprise, then kind of government or the public perception. Going to universities and kind of larger data providers, or I guess people who store data and have data for us to store, seeing what they've said publicly and being able to be part of that mandate. So for us, a lot of people have difficulty trying to greenify or create some form of real net zero standard for themselves. And they have to look at all aspects of their business. So looking at the existing storage providers, you have to see who the majors are, and are they carbon neutral, are they carbon negative, or are they net zero? And how does that fit into their business model, right? So when you have these people who have very strict mandates, we want to work with them and other people as well to help kind of clarify the entire supply line of what they're doing with their data by being 100% a green option for storage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've touched on some additional points there to Kevin, especially around kind of like local ordinances and kind of balancing all of those things, which are very important, especially as a client kind of trying to make those decisions. You have many things to consider, and sometimes that plays a pretty critical role, especially at scale and enterprise. So that's great. Ben, as the indie, as a kind of independent storage miner, like, is this something that's coming up? Is it still too early? Like, what are the conversations like there?
Yeah, we as independent, I don't think we have many of these conversations yet directly with the clients, but obviously this is a general thing about Filecoin. I think one of the important things here for being a storage provider is that are we actually able to look ourselves in the mirror doing this? So one thing is that, yeah, we buy some RECs and we use green energy and so on. But if we use that on users' calculations, so without talking bad about other blockchain technologies, but basically is the basic idea of how the protocol works, is that actually something that makes sense in an energy efficient way, or doesn't make sense? And I think the good thing, or to start with the bad thing, is that it's quite complex to tell a client about how Filecoin works and why it does what it does. But then again, once you get over that, the good thing is that in general, we are not doing anything for fun or just for a simple competition or anything. It has a purpose to actually show that you have the data that you say that you store. That makes really good sense. And hey, you get consensus next to it. And I think that going down the road, one thing is to figure out how can we make this, even these setups go off grid if possible. But another thing is that, now that we have a consensus mechanism, which is not using terrible amounts of energy, what else could we use that for? And kind of expand that into, I think there could be some future for Filecoin in that as well, because I really think that this kind of setup where we are doing storage or providing storage and basically running that, but we also have this consensus mechanism running around it. I think you kind of get multiple things at the same time, which is a pretty awesome feature.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed. And it's interesting, like, because you're having like everyone here is having slightly different conversations, right? It's very dependent on your business model and how you're kind of approaching things. Kevin, you started, like you said, as an indie shop and then scaled. Ben, you're still kind of independent. Charles, you're working at kind of a really, really big scale. So it's really fascinating to kind of hear what stage sustainability and kind of greenness is coming into the conversation, or if it even is yet. But also, like, it's good. This is bringing up some important issues around like how we explain Filecoin. Like, how do we simplify explanations, or how can we be clearer in different areas? I'll be straight back to my desk after this panel. Okay, great. So I'm going to switch up a little bit. Devin and Charles, if you'll allow me. We have a question from the crowd. Measurement of energy use and location-based matching of energy consumption are major issues in space, and distributed systems present unique challenges. How do you think Filecoin and crypto more broadly should estimate energy use and location beyond just using on-chain proofs? Devin, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Yeah, absolutely, happy to, Andy. So what we've kind of come up with, actually, it's already an existing technology, just kind of slightly repurposing it, and that is digital net metering. A lot of electric companies and things are already doing it, but by using the digital net metering, we can tell, basically to a T, what is being used, when it's being used, how high the power consumption is, at any given time of day. And in that regard, you can, you have a pretty good idea, at least, of when your peak times are, when they're not. And I think basically that's kind of the key to doing that. It's going to be a hardware solution for the most part, especially for some of the larger builder setups and stuff.
Charles, do you agree with Devin? Do you think, do you have another perspective?
Yeah, so with that, and in the industry I'm currently working with, we're working with lots of companies in machine learning, and they're primarily using AWS services, and some services provided they hosted their servers just at home or even in our office. So from some regions like in Ontario or even in Calgary, just talking about Canada, those provinces, some of them are using oil and gas, and some of them the pure gas. Those are not really environment friendly, but it also has the impact of the laws. There may be political issues that comes because you maybe have a tax credit, so increase the price of your cost when you're doing the industry storage and the calculation. So based on this consideration, when the storage going larger scale and also computing goes large scale, those companies will have issues that one day they might be forced to migrate their data to a more eco-friendly, more eco-green places. So in order to stay with the existing and waiting for the day come, it's better if we start doing it now. So Filecoin storage is really good in this part. We have so many storage providers over the world. Currently, we have more than 3,000 nodes. So we have really lots of places can distribute those risks because, not the risk. We can distribute the storage to the friendly place and a more regulated place. So it's really good for them. Also for them, more about the existing infrastructure. We currently have more than 1,000 servers hosted in our data centers. So some of them is providing storage services and lots of GPUs. Currently, some of them are doing the industry levels. By using the industry calculation, I believe that we can get lots of carbon credits, which can be used for the exchanges in the future. So I think with the incremental needs from the metaverse, the NFTs, those 3D images, rendering, all the industries that will put more and more demands for the Filecoin storage. And I think this is really the trend.
All right, thank you so much, Charles. Again, adding an additional perspective there. This is great. We're getting some questions, and people are watching the live stream, and we're getting some questions. So I'm going to share one more. What role can Filecoin play in transitioning to green crypto more broadly? Kevin, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I couldn't unmic the microphone. Sorry. So the question about how can Filecoin help transition toward green crypto more broadly? I think when I think of that question, I immediately think of this famous quote from Macbeth. It was, "With all great Neptune's ocean, wash this blood clean from my hand." It's been maybe a decade and a half since that class in secondary school and high school. But I still remember that quote because it was the idea of Macbeth had committed something that was now guilty on his conscience. And even with water or with something, you couldn't clean yourself of that. Today, as I think others have mentioned in the United States, we're a little bit behind with green energy, especially in the IT world. When we say things like, when we call claim to 100% renewable, it's really just an accounting trick where that 100% claim is really subpar. You're cleaning your conscience, calling yourself green as a marketing optic, where you buy these RECs or you do something and it's really kicking the can down the road. And it doesn't really wipe that company's green claim clean of that, I guess, dirty deed. It's when it comes to crypto, there is a reason for there's a reason for using the electricity that we do use. It's a matter of not just security, there's also benefits that we have to consider that are part of how it is that the crypto economics work. But at the same time, being creative, using the benefits of Web3 to enable something useful out of that energy exchange would be a place where Filecoin could distinguish itself. Not only because inherently by storing data, we don't need to be, for example, spinning those hard drives all the time. That's already one like inherent difference that we have. Now thinking about all the compute and energy use that we have to have as a result of sealing and proof of space, proof of rep, POREP, then that's really a space for innovation. And Filecoin, the PL team, the foundation, and the ecosystem within Filecoin already thinking about this early on will enable us to set some sort of standard that is so much greater than what exists without kind of pointing fingers at other ecosystems, allows us to set some standard that others can follow. I think Filecoin is just perfectly positioned to demonstrate green crypto broadly and that others can replicate just because of what we're doing, starting with storage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we discussed, like we have discussed like many times, is like, you know, it's rising tides, like, you know, to like be the example and, you know, and help everyone, like, you know, our tooling is open source, like you know, the pointing fingers thing is, you know, daft, right? We're all grown-ups, and it's kind of the opportunity to say, okay, you know what, this is working for us, like, do you want to come and contribute to this? Like, let's find a way where like we can integrate this into your system. But really it's got to be like a cross chain effort. It doesn't just start and finish with Filecoin. We really feel that deeply internally as well. This is something that is much broader, and for all of us as part of the Web3 kind of ecosystem overall. Alex, what's your thoughts here? What can Filecoin do? If you had, you know, you can make any decision, there are no limits, like what do we do next?
Well, I think there's something that's, you know, really interesting about Filecoin, and I spend a lot of time looking at, you know, all sorts of different crypto networks and different consensus mechanisms. You know, the consensus mechanism that Filecoin has already actually allows you to use the resource that you're creating, which I think is either unique or maybe there's someone that I've never heard of that's doing it as well. But everybody else is really just creating or using resources and wasting it. That's how their consensus functions, is you know, how much resource did you waste and you prove that you wasted it. Whereas the resources that we're using here, we're actually able to go out and create value with that, not just from an economic standpoint, but actually create value with that from an enterprise standpoint. So looking at that, I think that's already a big step forward that a lot of people are either unaware of right now, or it's really unique to the network. So it's very exciting. And I also think, you know, partnerships that you guys are doing with Energy Web and creating this type of accountability is really important for a lot of different networks. And I think it's been brought to light in the last little bit, again, looking at Bitcoin and Ethereum, but being able to create that accountability and increasing those tools for storage providers and other stakeholders to be able to take advantage of. And I think one of the big pieces, and it's come up a lot in our research about how the ESG world functions, particularly with an environmental lens, is that there's such a mishmash of different standards and requirements, and nobody really is on the same page as anybody else. So we've kind of come to the conclusion that the best thing to be doing is really just disclose what you're doing and why you're doing it, and let people make up their own decisions. So I think it's both a compliment and a suggestion. Is, it's very exciting that you guys have taken this initiative to increase transparency and allow storage providers and other network participants to take advantage of that. And I would suggest continue to go down that path and allowing people to make their own decisions and give people the tools to allow that.
We're on the same page, Alex. No, that's yeah, absolutely agree there. Yeah, I think that's something like we want to be open, we want to be transparent, and like we invite everyone else to do the same thing as well. I think it's great. We can all work together and move forward. Ben, you've got no limits. What do we do next? What can Filecoin, especially like again, you're bringing kind of an independent storage provider perspective as well. What do you believe can help folks in your position?
Well, as an independent, I would say that Filecoin needs to be as distributed as possible all around the globe. So as a small storage provider, I would actually like to see some kind of model where it is possible to run it like from smaller facilities, not only from really large scale data centers, but also maybe in facilities where, in my perfect view of the future, I actually like very much the whole idea of having this kind of a fog computing concept. So say that you have an office space, and then in the basement, you might have some hardware remotely controlled there by some provider. But basically, that's kind of what brings you hot water, what brings you all the heating and so on for that specific facility. So you maybe look into not only having these, now we are obviously decentralizing much more than compared to the few big cloud providers, but still, I think in the future, maybe not near but longer future, this could actually be something that goes, so infrastructure lives with houses and so on, and basically that you have some kind of setup where you make sure that when you are using the energy, it's kind of connected to also other purposes. But I know for the protocol as it is right now, there is a lot of things pointing at you might want to look like a pretty much like a tier 1 data center. And I think there, so there is a way to go there before we can look at different models, how you could facilitate having something like that. But yeah, that's kind of my view for where I would like to go somewhere in the future.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, as you said, that's maybe not today, but we have to start thinking about the things that we want to see, right? Even if it feels like very out there and not quite, we've got to build towards those things. And having chats like this and conversations like this is how we kind of bring these things up and say, look, I think there's a path here, let's figure it out together, let's build back. So yeah, it's wonderful. We're gonna all have to get into the Phil Green channel after this and start planning some projects. Definitely. Devin, what's your thoughts here? What can Filecoin do?
I mean, first of all, I think that just the fact that everyone's here, we're having this meeting, we're having these discussions, that's a huge advantage compared to, most of the other cryptos, most of the other ecosystems. While most of them are kind of ignoring the problem or just recently figuring out the problem. You and Alan and everybody have been working on this for quite some time, and it's great to finally see its fruition. So I think, first of all, what we're doing right now is what we're supposed to be doing. As far as what we need to do in the future is we just need to figure out a way to incentivize miners to go green. Ultimately, that's the short of it.
No, listen, short and sweet, and you're right, and that's definitely there's the kind of like, yes, we can build it, yes, we can make these tools, like we can build these tools, we can make things available, but what are the next steps like? And you know, how do we properly and fairly incentivize folks to kind of choose that path over other paths? So yeah, very, very important, definitely something we're thinking about deeply, but we'd love to have other perspectives. So yeah, very good call out and good point. Charles, tell us, I'm sure you've got great thoughts here. What else can Filecoin do? What do you see in the future? How can we make a really big impact?
Yeah, for now, like I think Filecoin have a very great network, but we still need to encourage more people join our network, and also make it storing more data. We have lots of like infrastructure level. We still have some storage providers that need to be trained to provide more services. These are like service quality, so we can get more industry usage. Second part is like I'm glad like to participate in today's event. So we know that we started moving toward green. So we needed to pass this information to our clients. I mean, it's like to add it to our materials and adding to each storage provider should tell our clients about the great benefits about the like storage in green, calculation in green, and the entire blockchain to green. So to differentiate ourselves from the normal storage projects like, the normal POW projects, like, because lots of people still thinking that Filecoin is a POW, so proof of work. So proof of work means that energy consumption, but we're not just energy consumption, but we're also doing things for good. So this is really like we can move next step to tell our clients to increase our usage and influence in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to put it out there, this is the utility network. Like it's useful storage. Yeah, all of these things, kind of raising our voices more, and really kind of leaning into that messaging and making people aware. I think is going to be important. Right, I have one more question for each of you, and then you are dismissed from the panel. I'm going to start. Let me see. Let's go backwards. Charles, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. You have two companies in the space. So you've got Swan Cloud and Nebula AI. Swan Cloud built FilSwan, which connects clients to storage providers, and Nebula AI provides distributed cloud AI services. How do you see the customers of these services shaping the need for verifiably green services in the future?
Wow, it's quite an interesting topic. Like in the beginning, like we going in the storage market because we believe that without storage, we barely can do anything. So after 1 year of development, what is amazing is that as long as we growing the storage from 1 server, 10 server, 1,000 server, what is bring out that we prove the capability of managing those servers and also prove the capability to bring up the storage in scale. And when we talking about our clients in different locations, we found that, for example, people in Ontario, their electricity cost is really high because they are not 100% reliant on hydro, and they have lots of like high cost of them. So they are very interesting to move to a green place with have energy is lower consumption. Also because the Quebec have a very cold temperature, we have -40 in the winter. It's not something special. So those are all the advantages, and then we convince them that even though now the only storage with us, but we have so many services we can ready to use, and also we see that some storage they start now maybe just not put in Filecoin yet as a backup layer, but they are so interested one day to migrate from the Amazon or other cloud service provider to Filecoin because the cost effective, because of the environment friendly. There are lots of reasons. So we provide those kind of information that's so interesting. And also with the GPUs, as people may know that it's just so hard to get GPUs recently because of the productivity of the electrical components. So with Filecoin network, we have so many resources. Some of them they can be reused. So this is another kind of reuse energy or reuse equipment. So that's very attractive for them. We already get orders from a deep learning company, like they're doing the image processing for the medical data. I really thinking is really fantastic.
Awesome, that's great. Thank you so much. And yeah, like you said, optionality. Like as soon as people line these things up alongside each other, if the green credentials are there, that potentially will motivate you to move in that direction over another. Okay, great. Alex, just going to mix it up for fun. Alex, Seal Storage is very far along in the emissions estimation piece of the renewable crypto puzzle. What factors into your emissions estimates, and how do you see those estimates evolving over time?
Yeah, I mean, we are, as you said, we're quite far along in terms of establishing what our process is going to be. We've got a twofold process. The first is going to be ongoing disclosure, and that's going to have a dashboard on the website where people could go and look at mostly calculating the energy usage and where that energy is coming from and in what area and kind of what grid it's coming from and the varying effects from that. On an ongoing basis, there will also be other disclosures throughout the year that include more in-depth aspects of the company that would go to a scope 2 of emission sets. So we're just in the process of establishing how that's going to work and how the reporting is going to be done and what can be automated. There's a certain level of tools that you guys have created. There's additional tools out there in the market that we're looking at how to plug that into our systems, but there's also going to be a certain level of manual pieces that are going to have to go into how we calculate this. So looking at our initial emissions is really going to be heavily focused on the energy usage, but then there'll be additional that we'll have to start doing with the transportation of equipment and movement of staff, and as the company scales and increase size in various geographical locations, it's understanding how that affects our disclosures and what the various rules and regulations are in those places. So it's really going to be an ongoing process, and just starting here from the beginning of where are we now and what are our biggest pieces, and then where are the areas that are going to get bigger over time. So yeah, that's I think the biggest issues for us now are how complicated the energy grids are, and we have potential for using offsite compute, or we have additional compute coming from different areas. So it's really a complex calculation, but we're slowly getting our handles on it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Alex. Listen, I have a million more questions for all of you. I feel like I could talk all day, but we do have some other great talks coming up. So I'm going to hand over the floor. I just want to say a huge thank you to Kevin, Alex, Ben, Devin, and Charles for joining me today and sharing your perspectives and your insights. Let's continue the conversation over in Filecoin Slack in Phil-Green. I do have more questions for you from the audience. So if you can go over there, I'll share them in there. Whenever you get the chance, please answer. Thanks so much again for joining me today. Right, over to the next session. What a day we're having, it's brilliant. Okay, next up we have Shayna Baser. Shayna is the community manager at the Crypto Climate Accords, and she's going to share a little bit about the Crypto Climate Accord with us today. Take it away, Shayna.
Thanks so much, Angie, and thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to talk about the Crypto Climate Accord just a bit, and hopefully begin to highlight the tremendous impact of Protocol Labs and Filecoin in really driving progress here. I do want to give a bit of background about myself. So I joined the Energy Web team back in June. I work with Miriam and Andres, who you heard from earlier today. And before that, I spent most of my career working within the United Nations and humanitarian system. So a lot of conversations about the urgency with which we need to address the climate crisis and how we need to save the planet and ultimately improve the quality of life for all of her inhabitants. And not surprisingly, the fundamental challenge with global interdisciplinary work is that it's impossible to reach consensus. I mean, we're lucky if we even get everybody in the room. And one of the things that I think is just so exciting about the Crypto Climate Accord is it's a truly global effort of stakeholders from across crypto and blockchain, fintech, climate, energy, who've all come together with a sense of unity and collaboration. I mean, some people are considered direct competitors to one another. And so to see such a level of enthusiasm and action behind a cause is really incredible. Everyone has come together not only to deliver on, broadly speaking, green crypto, but to execute this in a way that is going to create pathways for other industries to follow suit and create that lasting legacy change across industries. The Crypto Climate Accord is not an organization, and I'll go into a bit of detail about who's involved. The best way to think of it is just as a set of objectives. We're here to decarbonize crypto and blockchain by 2040. The community of supporters includes over 180 companies. This initiative launched in April, so we've seen a tremendous amount of growth in a very short time. And more than half, that actually officially as of last week, we officially surpassed the number of supporters with the number of signatories. So more than half are making an additional public commitment to achieve net zero emissions from their electricity consumption and verify their decarbonization using best practices within the next decade, which is really, really groundbreaking, given the challenges that we have ahead of us, and really encouraging to see this kind of action and momentum in such a vital space. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for the crypto sector to emerge as a global leader in decarbonization for multiple reasons. It's been alluded to a number of times over the course of today's call, but this year in particular, we saw a significant amount of criticism surrounding the environmental impact of crypto. And I think the simplest talking point is that crypto is not the only energy intensive industry, it's just one, but we have an opportunity to do something that I don't think anyone else can do, which is embrace rapid innovation and make change very quickly in a very decentralized manner, and one that's very rooted in solutions that actually have widespread application for all users. The impact of moving forward really aggressively with this type of an initiative is really tremendous when we think about the renewable energy market. Miriam earlier today was walking us through what RECs are and the global market there. And even by the most conservative estimates of the crypto industry's annual consumption, it's more than half of what the global market for renewable energy certificates actually is. So what we can do together is not only decarbonize, but position crypto stakeholders, whether they're miners or exchanges, as a new class of renewable energy buyer, really grow that market. And that contributes to electrifying hard to reach areas, that contributes to investment in more projects that are ultimately going to enable us to tackle these really big, daunting global goals in a very nuanced way. The Crypto Climate Accord is not owned by anybody, true to the spirit of our work. It's decentralized. So nonprofit Energy Web joined forces back in April with the environmental think tank, the Rocky Mountain Institute, and a US-based regulatory engagement firm, the Alliance for Innovative Regulation, just to begin convening activities. So helping make sure that all appropriate stakeholders are actually in the room, that we have a path forward, that we're able to do a needs assessment and understand what are those gaps in information and technology that we then need to work together to address. The way that the CCA operates is very much like a potluck. You bring what you can when you can. By being a supporter, what that means is companies are just signaling that this is a priority. This is not a certification or greenwashing, a way of just saying, you've done what you needed to do and you're all set and can white paper yourself out of the mess that you've made. It's a very intentional effort to really focus on developing the standards, developing the technology that we need to move our industry forward. The three primary activities under the CCA umbrella really start with this idea around benchmarking and good industry practices. The Rocky Mountain Institute, or RMI, has spearheaded a lot of this work in collaboration with a number of other companies within the community that's focused on how we actually account for scope 3 emissions associated with the crypto industry. And their report on crypto carbon accounting should be out hopefully by the end of this month. And that clarity is really essential. We heard earlier today from a number of speakers, just being able to produce that range and develop a strategy around that to decarbonize is really the first step. And what's exciting about their work is that that is then proceeding the next part, which is good buyer practices. How do we issue more clarity around, if you do X, you can claim Y? reducing that barrier to entry and bridging that gap in misinformation that's necessary in order for companies to actually adopt a decarbonization strategy is really critical, and it has to come first before any of the technology that we build. So there's been a lot of really fantastic, groundbreaking development on that aspect. From the tech solution toolbox, I'll go into the details of what we're doing there, but I think Miriam and Andres did a fantastic job of walking us through Zero and how the collaboration with Protocol Labs has really informed and guided that development. And then the third aspect of our work, which is just as essential, is being able to actually report out what we're doing and making sure that we're telling the story of crypto in a way that is truthful, but also in a way that's really clear and that's really digestible and understandable, offering these clear pathways for other industries and those within our industry to follow suit, and also to bridge that gap in understanding of where are we now, where do we need to go, what are we doing to get there, what lessons have we learned along the way. The Crypto Climate Accords solutions have primarily focused on delivering technology and standards for miners, exchanges, and investors, primarily around these three key themes, which is energy calculation, the digitization of renewables, and simplifying the procurement process, and delivering this verification of proof of green. So essentially breaking that down, particularly with the work that RMI is leading, by enabling, whether it's exchanges, mining operators, really any stakeholder within the space, to be able to estimate the emissions that they have associated with either their crypto holdings, their production, what have you, paired with simplifying the process of procurement. So by tokenizing and digitizing environmental commodities, starting with RECs through Zero, but ideally branching into carbon offsets, carbon removal credits, so that any type of stakeholder can pursue the ESG strategy that makes the most sense to them. And then further pairing that with this ability to track and verify renewable energy use. These are the three key ingredients to a global decarbonization, industry-wide decarbonization strategy, ultimately, by using decentralized identifiers to anchor the identity of, for example, a miner on chain, being able to pair that with their renewable energy use and deliver proof of green to their mining pool operator, to investors, to regulators. You're creating more opportunities for consumers to drive demand for these types of projects that align with their sustainability vision. And also we're creating the pathway so that if there is regulation down the line, or as investor priorities continue to hone in on this, the systems are already in place in order to be able to meet those needs, whether it's voluntary or involuntary compliance. So ultimately, that's what we're working towards with the Crypto Climate Accord. It's this private sector led, almost very grassroots feel type of an environment where folks contribute what they can in order to build these clear pathways towards decarbonization. It's an incredibly exciting environment, and love that we have the opportunity to work with Protocol Labs and Filecoin through this umbrella endeavor. And for those here who are interested in learning more, I hope you'll get in touch with us, and please drop some questions in the chat for us to address. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shayna. That was a great overview of the very important work that you're doing. Please consider asking your organization to join the CCA, either as a supporter or a signatory. You can learn more at cryptoclimate.org. Okay, sadly, it's time for our final session of the day. I'd like to invite Juan Benet, who is the creator of Filecoin and the CEO of Protocol Labs, and Alan Ransil, who is the lead of the Filecoin Green project, to join me, or to join each other, should I say, for a fireside chat. And I invite the audience to pop some questions into the chat, and if they get the chance, they'll have a look at those and answer them. Thanks so much. Over to you, Juan and Alan.
Thank you so much, Angie. It's really great to just be here today with everybody. This has been a phenomenal discussion. We've looked at so many different really critical components of making this set of projects a reality. So it really has been a phenomenal day, and I think we're advancing the space a lot by just having these discussions, but making plans and following through with them over time. So a huge honor for me to just be here with all of you and sharing the stage. What I want to do in through this discussion is to help spotlight the Filecoin Green project and ask a bunch of questions of Alan, who started and has been leading this project, and to hear about other goals in the future and so on. So along the way, if you have any questions that you would like to ask Alan or about the project in general, just put them on chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat here. And then I'll be pulling from those over time. I have a set of questions to go through. So just to help make this session a little bit of self-standing, I'll just quickly introduce Filecoin Green again. So the goal of Filecoin Green is to lead the way in renewable computing infrastructure, starting with the world's largest decentralized storage network. And to do this, the project builds tools to measure environmental impact and reduce it, with the ultimate goal of making the network a verifiably net environmental good. And it's my honor to be interviewing Alan Ransil. Alan is a project lead for Filecoin Green and has been at Protocol Labs as the in-house expert on energy and the environment since he got his PhD from MIT in 2018. He has worked on many different aspects of renewable energy, including doing academic research on solar cells, batteries, the power grid, and so much more. It's really great for the Filecoin network to be able to count on the expertise of many people like Alan, who are here to help make these networks dramatically better for the world. Great. So just starting off, Alan, can you tell us how did Filecoin Green start, and what was the help us understand sort of where this initiative is coming from, and how it came to be?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thank you, Juan, for the introduction, and everyone for the amazing conversations that we've been having today. Yeah, I mean, so we've been interested in sort of these two complementary aspects of what we're doing for a long time, right? So one thing is how can we decarbonize Filecoin, right? And then this other question is what can Filecoin and crypto do to sort of upgrade environmental accounting, right? And so so Michael Hammersley and I have been sort of exploring a lot of these ideas in Protocol Labs research for a while, looking at things like distributed power grids and looking at ways that we can sort of upgrade, use crypto to upgrade how energy works, how energy is accounted for, how energy is moved around, do things like peer-to-peer transactions, make apply design principles from distributed systems to distributed power grids to try to make them more resilient and reliable. I think once Filecoin launched a year ago, happy birthday, Filecoin. It really just became clear, as you can see the network capacity growing, that there was this opportunity to apply a lot of these things that we've been thinking about to Filecoin specifically, right? And sort of build this sort of Web3 infrastructure for dealing with renewable energy and sort of dogfood it on the network itself. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Angie, who's been emceeing today, and the panel for really really just having sort of a sixth sense for sort of what needs to happen when, and really pushing a lot of this along too, and really saying okay, these are the sorts of tools that would be really, really useful to have sort of right now, and sort of allowing this work to come out of all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's so critical in those moments to just get encouragement and guidance from operators, and just phenomenal. I'm sure she's watching at the moment, but she's really phenomenal in helping steer many groups over time. Can you tell us maybe something that Angie helped you to orient on to really make this a reality, right? So there's a huge difference often in projects when they're just getting off the ground. They could go in many different possible directions, and sometimes someone can give you the inspiration or the direction or help point you the way. Can you maybe share like what was like one of those examples of like really got this off the ground and happening? Because it's really awesome to be where we are now, and the project is headed in really great directions. but like sort of like when projects start like this, it's super interesting for other people to hear, so that they can also start their own things.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of it came out of sort of conversations that Angie was having with people in the ecosystem, and really, a lot of things that were discussed on the panel, right? This sort of the twin aspects of people wanting to be involved in Filecoin, but wanting to ensure that what they're doing is, environmentally, either positive or not as, not environmentally destructive, like, a lot of the sort of discourse surrounding this is, right? In talking to, I think, particular projects that wanted to be involved and sort of be partners, but had those concerns, I think she really saw, okay, you really need to connect these dots of saying, okay, if you take this action, what impact is that going to have, right? Which has been sort of a holy grail in the broader sort of environmental accounting field for a long time, right? I was talking to people who manage investment portfolios, and they would really like to be able to say, okay, what are the emissions of our investment portfolio, and what can we do to take actions to decrease them, right? And a lot of those tools are being built in Web 2, but things aren't really verifiable and they aren't really that interoperable. And so, I think taking a lot of sort of the way that Web3, deals with data, right, that you've described as, the Merkle forest, right, where if you hash link all these data structures, they aren't just sort of verifiable and interoperable in the context of the thing you're building, but they are part of this sort of larger universe of verifiable interoperable data structures, right? And like it's that sort of, the power of working with data that way, which is really core to, IPFS and Filecoin, is really what we're going to need to give people, the ability to track these environmental impacts many levels throughout a supply chain. And yeah, I mean, Angie, has really just seen how in like very specific projects, when, people have particular concerns, how can we like build the actual tools that are going to be necessary to address those particular concerns, and then do that in a way that's really scalable and reusable and open source.
Yeah, awesome. In the interest of looking at all of what, the whole village that it takes to get efforts off the ground here, who else is working on Filecoin Green? So we've heard from a number of folks today, and we've heard from partners and from storage providers that are already getting involved. But who's working on sort of like getting all of the tooling in place and so on?
Yeah, I mean, so Angie and Emily in ecosystem have been working a ton on all different aspects of Filecoin Green. The Sentinel team, which is building this database to really give us tools to better understand what's happening on chain at any given time. They've been super helpful for sort of building out the ability to understand forgiving miner ID, or be able to sort of work with on-chain proofs and then translate that right into energy use. And so especially Hector, Ian, and Mike have been fantastic there. The reputation system team, right? So we're building all of these tools and aiming to integrate them with the reputation system, so that when a client wants to store data on Filecoin, one of the factors that they're able to account for is which miner ID is actually buying renewable energy, right? And so the reputation system, especially Deep and Alex, have been incredibly helpful at adding that functionality and sort of integrating these tools into the whole rep system. SPs who are really sort of leading the charge on a lot of this, the sort of amount of sort of creativity and passion that they bring into how to think about these issues has been incredibly helpful and inspiring, and participating in the demonstrations that we're building, contributing a lot sort of intellectually to this, sharing data with me so I can build models of energy use and sort of relate proofs to actual power bills, right, has been extremely useful. And we're going to publish some of that soon. And in addition to the amazing SPs who were on the panel today, Nelson Chen and Stuart Bergman have also been super helpful, and also Rob Quist. And then I think the other sort of big group of people who have been contributing a lot to this are sort of other organizations, especially the EWF folks, some of which you heard from today, and they're really sort of the farthest along in building Web3 native tools for interfacing with existing environmental attribute markets, and also the CCA for really sort of leading the charge on getting everyone sort of rowing in the same direction. And then also Digital Mob is a dev shop that's been super helpful in terms of actually sort of building some of this tooling.
Awesome. Well, thank you to everybody who's been pushing all this along. This is a phenomenal project, and this is just the beginning of something really, really great. So I look forward to helping push this along and help you orient the entire network towards a much better future. So let's dive into the tech. So can you tell us how much energy Filecoin uses right now? Like, just kind of get a sense of the scale of what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So our best guess right now is that it is something like 130 megawatts, something like that, which accounts for several things, right? So firstly, that's the energy to seal files, right? So to onboard storage to the network. Secondly, it's the energy to store those files over time, right? And we can see that on chain, right? There's a proof corresponding to sealing a sector. Then there's a series of proofs, one every day, to verify that the sector is continuing to be stored over time, right? So we have this sort of anchor in the chain that corresponds to energy use. And then that is something called power usage effectiveness, or PUE, which is a measurement of the sort of overhead that goes into running a data center operation. So that's things like cooling and losses from stepping power down to power electronics, all of that stuff. And so that's the best estimate, right? Is about 130 megawatt hours, which is roughly 1% of Bitcoin, sort of based on the estimates that are out there. With the really important difference, right, that this is this is energy that's used to actually provide a service, right? This is actually used to store files. It's not just energy that is used to secure the chain, although it also does secure the chain, right? And then I think a good way of making a comparison there, comparing a network, Filecoin, which does this useful thing, store data, to Web2 technologies that do the same thing, store data. A good sort of point of comparison is about Filecoin has a capacity of about 0.5% of the rest of estimated data storage in DCs right now, and that energy use is also around 0.5%. So that's sort of the rough comparison you can make there right now. And with, of course, the important caveat, right, that we're working with Heralds and others to refine these models over time. And this is sort of a first stab at this problem, but we're really committed to doing a better job at really sort of understanding what the power use is and other sort of environmental impacts of the network too.
Yeah, so that's a pretty large amount of energy. It is not, as big as many as other blockchains, or as big as all of the data centers in the world, of course. But it's very sizable. So we should take responsibility of making sure that all of this is green and headed in a really good direction. From what you're saying, it sounds like Filecoin operation is roughly similar to normal data center operation. Does that mean, so initially we were pretty worried that sealing, for example, which is a pretty energy intensive operation, might be worse than a normal data center workload and so on. What is your thinking so far on this? Is it worse? Is it normal? Is it under?
Yeah, totally. So if you think of energy to store data and then operations being done on that data, right? So the energy used to store data is similar, right, according to this estimate, and then the operations done on data, sealing is roughly corresponds to workloads in normal data centers, is sort of a good way to parse that.
Yeah, and that's because in normal data centers today, a lot of them have a lot of GPUs and maybe are doing machine learning training and optimization and whatnot. So we're sort of using commodity hardware, I'm guessing, and because we're using commodity hardware, then you sort of match DCs, and we don't have to do go to something more esoteric or something that where it's not as optimized.
Yeah, and like I think also in particular, once you've sealed the sector, right, you've set up all these proofs with all these snarks to allow you to prove over time that you're storing that data. The actual energy consumption of producing one of those proofs and post over time, that is basically trivial compared to the energy use of sealing and storing the data. So those along with overhead are sort of the big energy consumption.
Great. So and even there, I think there's probably a lot of room for improving the energy efficiency of sealing over time. Like new pour-ups might arrive that can improve the energy expenditure and so on. So how do you anticipate that energy use will change as the network matures? So of course, just mentioned pour-up as one possibility. What are some other possibilities that you see along the way in the network as it expands?
Yeah, and I totally think, as you know, the proofs team is working on more efficient proofs, that is gonna lower the energy cost of sealing over time. Definitely, that's true. Then I think the other big thing to note is that as you add capacity to the network, the energy use is going to become dominated by the data that you are storing sort of in steady state, not the growth, right? So as the network matures over time, it's going to sort of asymptotically get closer to a normal data center, because this one term for sealing, that's sort of that extra load, is extra work that's proportional to the rate of growth, and it's the rate of growth relative to sort of the integral of all growth up to that point, right? So if you're storing a huge amount of data, then that's your main energy consumption, right? And because posts are really efficient, that is not a particularly energy intensive component of the network.
That's great news. So that sounds like then what we need to focus on in the long term is energy efficiency in the same way that commodity data centers do, which means better drives, better commodity server hardware, and just like better DC type, better data center tech and so on, which really aligns the incentives of the Filecoin network with the rest of the world in terms of not creating like custom hardware or custom systems that are different and whatnot. Like the sealing process is a little still in commodity hardware, but it's a bit of a different process than most data storage networks in the world. So that's great news. And do you have a sense of like how far away that carrying capacity, like the network being the energy use of the network being dominated by the data being stored will kind of cross over, or also, it's early days, so maybe you don't have that estimate yet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it we're at a point now where they are fairly comparable, right? So it's I don't know I don't remember what exactly the percentage is, but it's energy to store and energy to seal at the moment, sort of instantaneously, are pretty even. And so, as it grows over time, you would expect it to sort of asymptotically get.
That's great. So it sounds like we're at or close to that crossover point. Is then from with the current growth rate and so on of the network, or even if the network starts growing at a faster rate, we're fairly close to energy being dominated by just the carrying of the data and so on. That's great. So great. So let's dive into making all of the energy use green. So can you describe Filecoin Green's approach, at a high level?
Yeah, totally. So I think we really need to set goals, right, for what we want to achieve. And this sort of long-term vision is to be able to make the overall network environmentally positive. And so what that means is we need to have a really granular understanding of what the environmental impacts are of the network right now. And we are sort of farthest along, and the research in general, right, is farthest along on estimating the electricity use to run the network, right? So as Harold said a bit ago, there's basically no academic work or very little academic work on like life cycle analysis or embodied emissions, right? And we really need to build that out and are going to build that out in the future. But we're sort of farthest along on what's called scope 2 emissions, which is emissions from electricity that you use in your operation, right? And so the sort of big picture is we really need we're setting this goal of wanting to buy more renewable energy than we use, wanting to pull more carbon out of the air than is embodied in the hardware that we use. And so what that means is there are sort of two components, right? We need to understand in a very granular way what those impacts are. And so we're building those tools right now and working with academics, including Harold and others, to do a really, really rigorous job sort of understanding those impacts. And then we need to connect those impacts to things like renewable energy markets, right? And so that's the piece where we're partnering with EnergyWeb and looking at what are the different options, right, for doing sort of in the context of Filecoin, right? This distributed system, which is very different from the systems where people have sort of scaled up, this sort of environmental accounting before. How can we do a very cognizant job of connecting, for example, energy use to existing renewable energy markets, right? We don't want to invent the wheel and come up with some entirely new standard, right? We're really saying sort of, okay, if you have a miner ID that is in this location, how can we do a very rigorous, transparent job of connecting you to the existing rec registries that are monitoring renewable energy in that area, right? And how can we make that sort of as rigorous and transparent as Alex was saying from Seal Storage? The transparency here is really, really crucial. How can we make that as rigorous and transparent as possible? And then I think what we're really trying to do too is help catalyze the sort of existing industry best practices to become better, right? And so one example of that is it's sort of industry best practice. If you're a big company in sort of the legacy economy, you estimate your energy use for an entire year, and then you buy renewable energy credits, RECs, that were produced 6 months before that year, during that year, or 3 months after that year, right? So if you want to achieve something where you have this closer tie-in between energy use and renewable energy production, this sort of 21-month accounting window is like not ideal, right? And so this was something that Kevin mentioned in the panel from Picnic, is that we would really like to move toward closer standards to really match renewable energy use to production, right? And so we're trying to shorten that accounting period. We're looking at 1 month for this next round of this program that we're doing. And then also engaging with groups like Energy Tag, which is building standards for very, very granular sort of 1 hour matching, or, to support 24/7 renewables. And really looking at how can we build functionality that is useful in the Filecoin network. And then also how can we support building tools that are going to be useful in other crypto networks and in the sort of broader economy beyond that.
This is awesome. If I can highlight one of the things I love about this approach is setting strong goals, building tools, go after low-hanging fruit, make some significant, impactful moves, but not letting perfect be the enemy of the good, and just start the process of turning Filecoin green, and then over time increasing kind of pressure for more and more systems and more processes to become greener and more optimized and so on. So I think this is awesome, and I think it has a very high likelihood of not just working because it's already working. It's being super impactful in turning Filecoin into the greenest blockchain in the world, and in really paving the way for the broader crypto industry and for storage networks in general. So you mentioned renewables and renewable energy credits and so on. So and before I've also heard a ton about carbon offsets and carbon credits and whatnot. So why buy renewable energy credits instead of carbon offsets? Can you sort of unpack that for us?
Yeah, so like I said, we're trying to be very intentional about when we make these claims, what exactly is that claim tied to, and make that very transparent and very verifiable. And so the difference, so RECs or renewable energy credits always correspond to the generation of 1 megawatt hour of power in some regional power grid. And they have standards that already exist for how you track that power, right? And you can generally trace this REC back to the specific project that was used to generate that, right? So that's really what we're saying is like, okay, if you are storing, say you operate a Web3 company, right, that is storing data for clients on Filecoin, right? We want to build tools that would support you in, if that client wants to know, that client could ask you, you could tell them, okay, I stored that data with this miner ID, then that miner ID is traceable back to this particular certificate, right? Which has, comes from this particular wind farm or solar farm with like these GPS coordinates. And you can see in the REC registry that the REC registry knows that this miner ID bought that power, right? So it's like, can we really, really unambiguously map renewable energy many levels throughout a supply chain, right? And so that's really what you can do with RECs, and that's why we're starting with RECs. Offsets are just sort of a less mature market, right? So there's a lot of different things that offsets can mean. The goal of offsets, right, is always to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And people are doing a lot of work and developing great standards on, how to really tell, is this a good offset, right? But we're starting with RECs because that's really where you can get this very unambiguous, clear mapping to let people know exactly what you're claiming.
That's awesome. And that seems like a great strategy and a great trade-off of the conditions. So it sounds like over time, so both the REC registry helps us understand also the specific environment plants and the specific places that the energy is coming from, which also add verifiability both ways, right? Like some of these plants might be better than others. And so over time, you can kind of measure how high quality all of the energy being produces and potentially ratchet up the quality. And maybe for carbon offsets and other kind of credits and so on, maybe we can be a pressure there in expressing what things have to look like, so that we as a network might consider using those. So maybe a thing for the project to consider is maybe describing like what you would like to see in those systems, so that they make sense for us, and then publishing that so that then builders of in those systems know kind of what to target and how to orient ourselves, because already Filecoin is pretty large and is using an enormous amount of energy. As we get bigger and as the network keeps growing, it'll become a larger and larger load on the grid and a larger and larger factor. And so if we can be super green and we have a published set of requirements of how we would like to engage with some of these other markets and other assets and so on, then maybe those groups can actually turn around and do work towards satisfying the needs of the Filecoin network. So let's maybe talk. So we've talked about RECs, we've talked about carbon offsets. What about the hardware? So at the end of the day, you're buying some piece of hardware to help run the network, either primarily storage providers, but also some other developers and so on. And the manufacturing of that hardware involves all kinds of processes that might be pulling that those processes might themselves not be green and so on. How do we deal with this? How do we reason about it? How do we maybe select better hardware than others? How do we offset that? Could we maybe estimate some of this?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's so much there. Yeah, I think we would really like to be able to trace, right, not just emissions, but other types of environmental impacts, right? And so, people are looking at increasingly sort of recycling electronics, right? And currently electronics disposal is this sort of major source of pollution. So right, we'd really like to be able to trace, and Web3 dealing with data in sort of a Web3 native way should allow us to do this much better. Things like, okay, where did the tantalum in my device come from, right? Like, how can we work with members throughout the supply chain to really get a very granular view of, actually what are those environmental impacts, and how can we, once we have visibility into that supply chain, what can we do to lower, so first reduce and then mitigate those environmental impacts, right? And so I think, like you said, Filecoin, is buying a lot of electricity, and so that means we, as a network, can potentially put pressure on the producers of electricity, or if we buy a lot of offsets, we can put pressure on the producers of offsets to conform to a higher standard, right? So the Filecoin network also buys a lot of hardware. So it makes sense to try to work with companies supplying that hardware, who are going to conform both to good environmental practices, and also to higher standards of traceability in those practices, right? And then I think also looking sort of downstream the other way, right? So the storage providers in their panel were talking about how that type of traceability can be really important for clients, right? Or investors, right? And so I think there's a huge opportunity for us sort of in the middle of the supply chain, sort of on both sides, to really nucleate those tools and have them sort of grow in both directions, so that we're able to trace those sorts of impacts. And there's just so much both to research here, and so much to build here. And so please join the Phil Green Slack channel to be involved in building out sort of all of this.
That's awesome, and that's great. Great approach to it. And I think over time, though we're starting with the largest and most important part of the network, the source providers, I think we can also start extending a lot of that same kind of measuring and same kind of indications to developers as well. So there's a lot of software infrastructure that developers and different application providers have and run, and we don't yet have computing clouds that are fully decentralized and whatnot. So we can probably build some information on that as well over time, and sort of apply the same kind of thinking across to all of the different participants. So source providers, retrieval providers, eventually developers, and who knows, maybe clients as well at some point. So can you maybe describe what happens when SPs, when search providers buy RECs? We heard about how it gets connected to the registry. We've heard about kind of how you can trace it. But what exactly happens in the energy? Can you maybe express for us what is that actually doing?
Yeah, totally. And yeah, renewable energy markets are complicated, right? And so what we would like to do, right, is transition the power grid to be 100% renewable, right? That's sort of the goal. So RECs are one of the mechanisms that people have built over the past few decades to enable companies and individuals to try to do that, right? And so what happens when, say, a solar farm produces a megawatt hour of electricity? That electricity goes into the grid, so it goes into the wires, and the renewable attributes of that electricity are tracked and packaged into a REC, or renewable energy credit. And so the idea is that if you consume power on the same power grid, you can buy that REC, and then you own those renewable attributes. And it's sort of like you just got power directly from that solar panel, right? It is not exactly like you got power just directly from that solar panel, because you aren't necessarily consuming power exactly when that solar panel was producing it, right? And the existing grid doesn't have a lot of storage in it, so power in has to equal power out on sort of a very granular basis. And so what the really positive thing about that, right, is that it provides a revenue stream to developers of solar and wind and hydro and other projects that make it clear that you're going to be able to get money from this extra source when you develop additional renewable energy capacity. And that's really positive, and that's how a lot of grids have become lower emissions over time, right? Is using this mechanism. As we move forward, right, and we reach really higher renewables penetration in the grid, this question of are you using renewable energy at the same time as it is being produced becomes increasingly important, right? And so I think that's one of the major challenges right now in greening the grid, right? Is the intermittency of renewables and the lack of storage. And so that is something we're thinking a lot about, is how can the tools that we build, firstly, give us this very granular ability to really understand when is the network using how much power? And then secondly, what can we do to sort of play a role in raising those standards in order to come up with this sort of better matching? But that's sort of a quick summary of what happens when you buy a rec and what's good about the existing system that we're plugging into, and where can we sort of put some pressure to try to improve it, where we would really like to build towards something like 24/7 renewable, and are working with SPs to install local solar capacity there, and are also working with groups like Energy Tag, which are developing these standards, right? Because these standards need to exist, right? The standards for existing recs are already out there, but the standards for super granular hour-to-hour recs aren't out there yet. And so they need to exist, and we need to build projects that use them in order to sort of push the entire industry forward.
That makes a ton of sense. And is there, so far in a lot of conversations and just in general, this is how the world tends to target things. Everyone's trying to get to zero and get to, basically trying to match their energy expenditures with just as much renewables and whatnot. Earlier today, I was like, hey, we should be, 10xing that. We should be being 10 times as offsetting 10 times more than we use, or having some factor like this. Does this make sense, or is this kind of like a too aggressive, or is it too? Yeah, can you maybe what when you hear like a bold claim like that? Does that make sense? Is that crazy? Can we actually do that? Is 10x feasible? Especially think about as the network grows.
Yeah, I think that what we can do by setting those really aggressive targets, right, is play a role in catalyzing the transition of the grid to 100% renewable, right? So there's sort of one aspect to this, right, is that we are estimating Filecoin energy use, and we are that gives us this upper lower bound and an estimate. And we're in the systems that we're building, we're tying that 100% renewable label to that upper bound for now, which really means that, okay, this is the most electricity that we think that miner ID is using based on on-chain proofs. So let's link to recs that are accounting for that much electricity, rather than some estimate or a lower bound that, even if the estimate is what we think they're actually using, we really want to build that overestimation into the tools to begin with, right? And then secondly, there's no, and this is something that you've talked to me a lot about in conversations for a while, is how can we set things up such that 100% is not the upper bound, right? So you get connected to renewable energy that corresponds to your upper limit. Okay, well, you would play more of a role in catalyzing the transition to renewable energy if you bought more recs than that, right? So if you give more money to renewable energy producers in exchange for their product, and they're able to secure this revenue stream, which can then be used in the future to add additional renewables capacity, right? So yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to sort of design these incentive structures to hit targets that are higher than 100%, to say, look, we are confident that we are doing more than our part and really trying to play a pivotal role in decarbonizing the power system.
Yep, that's awesome. So a question, given the recent rise in NFTs and so on, are these RECs actual NFTs, or are they sort of like a claim in some registry somewhere, or how are they represented?
Yeah, so Energy Web has really been pioneering, working on a lot of this. And so as of late October, the RECs that we are buying are going to be recorded on their chain, on the Energy Web chain. And there's a fungible and non-fungible component to an one of their EACs. So the idea is they are able to point to the particular device or that produced that renewable energy, and then once a REC broker has taken those RECs and onboarded them to their chain, there is this fungible component that they're able to trade. So say you buy, a gigawatt hour, but someone only wants to buy, 100 megawatt hours, you're able to sell them that piece of that. So it doesn't map exactly onto an existing like ETH, like NFT standard, but it's sort of a standard built particularly for RECs and environmental attribute tracking on the EWF chain.
Yeah, I think there's utility in matching some of the standards over time, because it'll help the RECs themselves plug into a bunch of the tooling that people are building for NFTs. So that's useful. But all of that sounds great and makes sense. What other kind of artifacts do you see generating over time? Like what other kind of like verifiable claims are there that like might be like good projects for people listening that might attend one of the hackathons happening this month or next month around like maybe pushing on the frontier?
I think it would be really compelling to be able to go from energy used to emissions, right? And we were talking about in chat, and part of the CCA work, right, is to come up with carbon accounting standards for crypto that are heavily based on the greenhouse gas standards that are have been under development for more than a decade, and so in order there are different sort of established ways of calculating what the emissions are for your operation if you know the energy use, right? And so one example of that is what's called using a marginal emissions factor, which is the idea that if you have some equipment that's running that's connected to a power grid, you could take your energy use and multiply that by the average for that power grid. That's one way of calculating this, and that's sort of one of these standards in the greenhouse gas emissions standards for calculating emissions. There's you could also say you could take your marginal impact on emissions, which is to say if I flicked off this switch, what generating source would be turned off then, and what is my emissions in a granular way, sort of hour to hour, based on the sort of marginal emissions factor for this local grid. And I think it would be extremely compelling to build tools to allow the grid to see, to allow chains to see that, right, and be able to sort of import that data as a function of location and time to really get those marginal emissions factors and match them with power use. And I mean, there's tons of others.
Are you keeping like a running list of things you would like to see developed? Because it might be like good fodder for hackathons, or you might even consider running a Filecoin Green hackathon at some point.
Yeah, I think that would be really compelling, and we should put that in the channel.
Cool, awesome. So let's see. Great. So we've heard about RECs, we've heard about the actual process, we've heard about why we're using RECs now, we've heard about the total energy use of the network, we've heard about kind of like the life cycle for SPs and other groups. So how far are we along in this process? How much energy has the network, how much green energy has the network supported so far? Like, so what fraction of our energy use is green?
Yeah, so I think so. In our first showcase, so our first demonstration, where we got a group of SPs together and said, okay, let's just try this. Let's take a bunch of SPs. Let's estimate their energy use over the sort of lifetime of their activity on Filecoin, and by RECs corresponding to that energy use. They bought 712, I believe, megawatt hours of electricity. Which is, or of RECs corresponding to renewable generation, which is enough to power 66 American homes for a year, or enough to drive a Tesla. I think about the distance corresponding to here to the moon and back 10 times is a metric.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's the so I think so in this next round of that, right, so we've expanded that program, and we're looking at buying about 100 times that much in RECs, so about 78,000 megawatt hours or 78 gigawatt hours of renewable energy, which is going to sort of really upgrade the amount of energy that's being purchased corresponding to Filecoin, and make us sort of a bigger player in these markets. And we're really excited to expand.
Awesome. So that's jumping 2 orders of magnitude in one go, which is great, like ambitious, love it. What maybe at that point, like what fraction of the yearly use of energy will that be?
Yeah, I think that is a good question. I should go back to the dashboard to look at that. It's like, I think it's I don't want to say a number right now, top of my head.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, either way, like that sounds like a huge jump. That's awesome. I think giving it to us in like fraction numbers or things like that will help us, like will help me and others be like, oh yeah, awesome. Like this is what these numbers mean for us. And it gives us a target to hit, right? Because like if you tell us, hey, if the Filecoin Green project tells the broader Filecoin network, hey, we're about like 5% of our energy or like 10% of our energy, that gives us a target to hit and helps us frame the effort to get to 100%. But then beyond that, if we really want to hit like 10x and jump another order of magnitude, helps frame up the challenge. But yeah, that sounds great. So how does this compare? That sounds like a lot of energy. How does that compare to other networks? Like where are we on the scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think the networks that have been active in this so far tend to be other networks that run consensus mechanisms that make their energy use smaller. So right, like proof of stake or some variant of that. Which is great. Like if that's compatible with sort of the goals of your community, like you should lower your energy use and you should green that energy use, and like that's fantastic, right? Or then the sort of other category there have been projects that have said that use a lot of energy, right? But have made claims in a way that's less than sort of completely transparent and verifiable, right? So I think really what we're doing is taking this network that uses a substantial amount of energy and greening it in a way that is transparent and verifiable, right? And I think that's really where Filecoin can sort of lead the way in greening crypto, is being this use case and saying, okay, like we actually can be a big player in renewable energy markets, and we can give you all of the tools that you need wherever you are into this ecosystem, to really see not just both the impact of the network overall, but the impact of your particular actions in that network, and really sort of give people that transparency to really start shifting these systems in sort of more verifiably green direction.
That's great, and so I think, and this is why I want to push beyond 1x and get to 2x, 5x, eventually 10x, because it goes from hey, just clean up after yourself to being an actively beneficial party in the system, and it goes from hey, just fixing something you broke to oh wow, having Filecoin in this community, having Filecoin in this country is beneficial to all of the green energy producers in this region. And so by going to becoming like an over consumer of renewable energy will both actually help very tangibly orient many other communities towards doing that too, and like over time kind of avert the massive crisis we're in and try to get to closer to getting to global zero and ideally global net negative. But it'll also kind of along the way help benefit the broader network in general, and it'll help the network grow. So I think this is a lot of times I think is extremely useful to draw the kind of like really important economic business case for something that you want to achieve, right? So Tesla's a great example of this, like saying, hey, we need to move all of cars from fossil fuels to being electricity powered, so then we can power the entire grid with renewables. And it's okay. Well, the way to do it is like by making it just economically like the thing that people want, and have the shiny car make a really nice sports car like kind of thing that everyone wants to buy and whatnot, and then make it with the semis and so on, make it cost effective to do it and so on. So like I think the business case and economic case for a crypto network becoming super green and like a huge consumer can cause a pressure on countries to accept crypto, and then also start asking for more storage providers to come into that region, right? So if a region wants to increase its consumption of renewables and so on, and is investing heavily in renewables, then suddenly it might become it might start attracting SPs into that region, or start attracting Filecoin into that region, so that the Filecoin's green business comes their way. So I think like that can be helpful over time. So so that's awesome. That sounds really good. How do we get to? Is there some kind of like global leaderboard that we can look at where? Because I think leaderboards can be really useful in orienting large communities to go in some direction. So both maybe a leaderboard within Filecoin where we can see like different SPs and how they're doing, or ideally like a leaderboard for all of crypto where we can see how all of crypto is doing relative to each other, so we can because that kind of those kinds of systems and mechanisms pressure everyone towards that kind of like group action towards hitting the goal. Do you have like any thoughts on like building these kinds of things, or where do you stand on that?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the really compelling things, right, about the sort of design of Filecoin, right, is that because these individual miner IDs, right, are providing a service to clients, and clients need to decide which storage provider they're going to go with, the reputation system sort of automatically gives us the ability to make that leaderboard that you're talking about, right? And so we're continuing to work with the team building building PhilRep to incorporate that. And make it really clear and transparent. If you have all these different SPs that are all providing a really good service, who has really prioritized green energy there. I think the second piece of that is that the dashboard that we're building, Filecoin Green, that is going to be released in a few weeks publicly is the target. That is going to have a leaderboard built in once we're able to open up Energy Web 0 to any storage provider that wants to integrate with it, right? So currently we've done these sort of iterations of getting together a group of SPs and purchasing RICs and connecting them to the reputation system. The goal is in Q1 of next year to open up Energy Web 0 to anyone who wants to participate. And I think that's where it's really going to sort of make sense to have this leaderboard integrated into Filecoin Green, where you can really see who's doing that. And then I think in terms of for all of crypto, I think that's more of a hackathon project, and then people are working on a lot of these comparisons. I think we really need to standardize what it means to be a green blockchain, right? And make the bar for that standard extremely high, right? So it should be extremely verifiable, and more than 100%, like you said.
Yeah, that's great. So I think all of that stuff will push us in really good directions. In general, collaboratively competitive mechanisms are really, really useful. So when you can create some competition within a group that overall is collaborative towards some common goal, that tends to cause tons of like action and aligns incentives in the long term. So I think creating this dynamic within the crypto community can really help all of us and help all blockchains become green. What are some of the ways? So already kind of like the competition side of that is like really clear. What are some of the ways that we can collaborate? What are ways that we can interface with other groups and other networks that really care about this? We're already collaborating with EWF and CCA and others. How can we either help bring other chains to go and collaborate in that way, or what are other interesting projects that you think we should be collaborating with?
Yeah, I think so the CCA has sort of created this hub, right, for a lot of people who are interested in this, and a lot of different chains and groups. And there's a lot of flexibility as to how you work with the CCA, right? You can join as a supporter, which means that you support decarbonizing crypto. You can join as a signatory, which means that you have significant operations and you're committing to decarbonizing those operations on a particular timescale. And it's just sort of this great community where people can work together to share information and hash out standards and build tools to really do this in a verifiable way. And so I think that's extremely a really compelling way to interface with it. Then I think also pushing towards there's this group I've mentioned called Energy Tag a few times, which is working on developing standards for granular renewable energy credits. So rather than matching within this 21-month window, they want it to make it possible to match within an hour window, right? And so I think what we can do as people building tools, as SPs, as community members, to help develop some of those standards and to be early adopters of those standards. So we're really able to say, okay, we're using energy when this solar panel is producing it. I think is going to be extremely effective in, crypto and Filecoin catalyzing sort of the next push of renewable energy in power grids around the world.
That's awesome. I think that's a very compelling mission for Filecoin and for the broader crypto world to lead the charge, to have Web3 leading the charge in greenifying energy use by both building the tooling to make all this stuff way more verifiable and higher quality and so on. Also, way better markets that can connect to use the energy produced in various different parts of the world and whatnot in better ways, but also to start pushing into large scales to contend with and compare against major industries and start eventually kind of overtaking them. I think that's a phenomenal mission that we can all align with, and we can push forward. It'll take many years to get there, and it'll take all of us sort of working together towards that. But that's really great. So maybe to set benchmarks, how far away is maybe Filecoin from, or rather, how can Filecoin also help not just other crypto networks, but maybe cloud storage providers that are not yet in the Web3 world, and help them become greener, or how do we push in that direction, or how do we compare ourselves against those groups which are not kind of like in the blockchain space? They're just kind of normal data centers and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, I think building, when you were talking about sort of extending these tools to allow developers to work with them, I think building endpoints and standards to really allow people to use granular data on whatever you're doing, right? And chart those environmental impacts, and then sort of apply them how it makes sense in your situation, right? So if a data center, right, that maybe isn't in the Web3 world, wants to, use some of the tools that we're developing or helping develop to, give a similar, like very granular interface into what their power use is, and then connect that to, solar or wind or buy RECs or something, I think that's a really compelling use case. Or as people are developing, all sorts of different markets for digital goods, being able to, take your NFT and say, okay, where's it being stored, and where's the power coming from to store it, right? I think is really going to give, a lot of different types of players the ability to sort of upgrade what they're doing, right? And I think that really does, come back again, right, to once we take all of our computing infrastructure and sort of upgrade it with these primitives to make it verifiable and interoperable, we're just going to be able to do things, throughout the economy that are impossible to do with sort of legacy systems.
That's awesome. So then, you, as an artist or as an NFT collector or user, you could map to how much green energy the storage and use of this NFT maps to, and you could sort of like vote with your feet in a much more practical way, where you can move which platforms you use and which things you use by moving them into like the networks that are going to cause the most benefit, and again, not stopping at zero, like going way higher than that, and really starting to avert the crisis. Speaking of crisis, so we have this is all adding up to this major challenge in the world. First of all, thank you for starting this project, and thank you, Angie, and thank you so many other people who have contributed to help make this project, get it off the ground, and have like make a serious effort to both greenify Filecoin, but also use that to greenify all of crypto, and then over time greenify the rest of the world, and kind of provide tooling and better systems to get there. This is it's a huge mission. It's a huge, it's a tall order to avert this crisis. One of the big challenges of our for the entire species and for our generation. Just to benchmark it, I think the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, says we have until 2030 to lower carbon emissions 50% from where we are today, which is a staggering amount. And this is not something that like the world is on track to do at all. So how to tell us, like, how aggressive do we need to be here for Filecoin and for our community to help push on that and help have the highest impact?
Yeah, I think like, this really ties into a bunch of these themes that have been coming up all through today, right? So in 2018, the IPCC released this report that had a huge impact on me and a lot of other people, where they modeled emissions pathways over the next century, right? And they said, okay, so emissions pathways being how much CO2 or CO2 equivalent is being released, and what would a sort of release as a function of time look like that keeps us below 1.5 degrees of warming, which is, we're close, right? We're like, we don't have a lot of carbon budget left to emit. And what they showed is that in order to, stay below 1.5 degrees and to sort of avert the worst impact of climate change, our emissions basically have to peak around now, like 2020, 2021, and then decrease by 50% by 2030. So like globally, like super bend this curve down. And then most of the pathways they looked at involved significantly negative emissions beyond 2050, right? So like we really have to like take the entire world and transform the economy toward this sort of carbon negative economy. And that's, I think, crypto.
So grab onto the steering wheel of a semi and like yank it all the way really fast, as fast as possible.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like really astounding. And I think that, one of the things that crypto is amazing at, right, is identifying problems and solving them really quickly, right? There's just this tremendous amount of creativity and talent in the industry that is just working full speed at, fixing whatever problems are sort of on their radar, right? And so I think, we really need to sort of turn that as a community to decarbonizing crypto and decarbonizing the world, right? And so I think that, one of the things that we can do in the very near future is buy a lot of renewable energy, which is going to, show that people developing solar and wind have sort of a revenue stream from crypto that, like you said, has the potential to also support, because it supports your sort of local industry, right? There's a, that can be a huge motivating factor for countries and communities wanting crypto to be part of their community, right? And then I think, a second thing we can do, right, is upgrade industry standards and really show that because of the way that we're able to work with data and because we have this sort of very granular estimates as to energy use, we're able to hold ourselves to a higher standard than legacy industry, right? And one of those standards is taking accounting periods and shortening them, ultimately, maybe to a month, and then beyond that to something like 24/7 with like an hour accounting period. And then, I think then the third thing, right, is to not only set those standards high, but also just to make them really verifiable and really transparent. And then I think, once we build those tools and have those primitives, and you're really able to take environmental attributes and work with them in smart contracts, right? That's, I think, just going to unlock all of this creativity and energy that we can really, help support and channel toward solving, one of the biggest problems of our time.
Yeah, I think that this is really critical, and I think there's a very strong possibility that not only a strong possibility, but I think it is very likely that we can do something huge here, because, like you said, the power of crypto comes down to the scale and the speed that you get when you deploy large scale mechanisms, right? So if you design a good mechanism that actually works and has like a smooth gradient that large amounts of users and large amounts of capital and energy and so on can flow into, if that's scalable, then it'll just go as fast as possible. And so I think if we, I think the scaling part will be way easier for us and for Crypto 1.3 to do. The hard part is going to be in getting the right structures and the right mechanisms and so on. And so that sounds like we should be stepping on the gas stepping on the accelerator pedal of like your electric car hooked up to a renewable grid. We really need to change that lingo. We should be greatly accelerating the creation of a bunch of all of this tooling, not just for Filecoin and for our networks, but for other networks and for other systems. And so this maybe says, hey, have a ton more time and effort be put into hacking on tools like that, or identifying problems and diffusing the fact that those are problems. Many times I find it staggering that there are a bunch of problems that you and other people in the energy community know very well. And a lot of developers and other builders and product people don't know about. And if they did, like they would be able to solve them like relatively quickly. And a lot of times it's just about communicating what problems exist and creating a very strong incentive for causing that. So maybe we should start lots of both hackathons and maybe accelerated pathways for teams and communities and startups that help push on a bunch of these like really hard problems to solve. So it sounds something like I can help push on, and many other people in listening to this now can help push on. And let's end on that note, which is, what can you do? What can other people? So I was thinking of that as like, what can I do right now to like help this? Let's expand on what can other listeners and what can people in the audience and so on do to help with this massive challenge. So let's just go by some categories. So we've heard about storage providers. What would you like them to take away right now that they could do to help push on this?
Yeah, so I think firstly, SPs and everyone can join the Phil Green Slack channel, where we're going to discuss a lot more of this and announce things as they become available, and hash out a lot of the standards and get feedback on this. And I think a few things to sort of look out for there are we're going to be releasing this Filecoin Green dashboard in the next few weeks. And you can go there to see what we estimate for a given miner ID, the estimated energy use and upper and lower bounds are. And please give us feedback on that. Help us make it more useful to you, and help us refine our model. If you have more sort of energy data there that we can look at and compare and keep on making that model better over time. Then I think the next thing is we are going to be releasing this EW0 platform to everyone, hopefully in a few months. And please again sign up for that and green your energy use and give us feedback. And then I think, the other thing is a lot of SPs, as we heard in the panel, are already doing this, but just really sort of thinking creatively on like, how can your operation be more sustainable? And we really want to expand the tooling to account for different aspects of sustainability, right? So hardware is an example, but also things like digital net metering and building out sort of more of the tools for that.
What can builders and developers and product people do?
Yeah, so I think that as we are building these tools, we really want to give developers the ability to be able to work with environmental attributes and be able to factor those into whatever they're building, right? So, and part of that is transparency, and then part of that is reduction, and then part of that is mitigation, right? And those three are all super, they're separable but crucial aspects of this, right? Is you want to be able to build something where your users can see what their environmental impact is. You want to build something where because of the design choices that you make, and also choices that your users potentially make, they can lower their emissions, right? So data is much more useful if it's actually actionable. And then beyond lowering emissions, being able to mitigate them with say offsets or RECs or these types of things, right? So really thinking along those lines to build that. And we really want to support you in building all of this and making crypto green.
If you're a Filecoin community member listening in, not an SP, not a developer, what can they do?
Yeah. So please join the Slack channel, Phil Green, and we want to hear, what initiatives are you part of, and how can we really kind of work with you to build those bridges and build sort of a network of environmentally conscious Web3 actors, right? And really, can we collaborate across chain to track environmental attributes throughout Web3? Can we work with you to start hackathons or other events that are going to really sort of catalyze this transition? So please reach out.
And I'll suggest that clients should choose SPs that are green. So use PhilRep and go check on their score and choose to use storage providers that are green. And hey, if you're involved in, what about other people that are involved in other crypto communities? What can they do to participate in this project and to help with this challenge?
Yeah, I think there's just so much to build, right? So we really want to build this tooling to trace these environmental attributes through whatever project you're part of, right? And so when you're building stuff, make sure that sort of the environmental attributes are really like super verifiable, and see how we can help you in supporting tooling for that, right?
That sounds great, and probably a plug for other communities to join the CCA as well, and help support a lot of these groups that are really helping make all of this successful. Ellen, thank you. This has been like super successful. Are you planning to publish a roadmap for the project or something like that? Maybe give us a glimpse into the next few months.
Yeah, definitely. So that's going to be, we're going to be publishing, along with the dashboard, we're going to be publishing, how we got that data, where it came from, and, how we're going to be setting these tracks for measuring renewables, right? Where we're going to be able to look at the environmental attributes associated with a given miner ID. And sort of along with that, we're going to publish where we are now, what we've done, and where we see this going, and sort of really what the opportunities are to push all of this forward and accelerate this work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Angie, for inspiring Ellen and helping get all of this off the ground and going. And thank you to so many other people that have been working on making Filecoin green. and in just helping lead the charge. Hopefully we can keep the momentum up, greatly grow by orders of magnitude, and then really help pave the way for the rest of the industry. It's been really phenomenal to see this change, and I think this is something that we can all be really proud of. And there's a ton of work to do and a ton of impact to have. But this is starting us off in a really great direction. And I look forward to checking in, like, I don't know, yearly and see where we are. So let's set the goal that, like, next let's check in again 1 year from now, and see how much we've done since and where we are. Thank you to everybody participating in the network, and go help save ourselves and the world by making things green. Thank you.